So we're on? Okay. Billy's online, okay. Kia ora tātou, nau mai, haere mai, and a warm welcome to our Council Deliberations Long-Term Plan meeting for Thursday, the 30th of May 2024. Councillors, colleagues, will just open with a karakia and I'll invite the Deputy Mayor to speak.
Mōrena, Your Worship, mōrena e hoa mā, ngā mihi nui, tēnā koutou, ngā rangatira e mā takitaki ana, kia orana, talofa, tēnā no hoki koutou. Tū tawa mai I runga, tū tawa mai I raro, tū tawa mai I roto, tū tawa mai I waho. Kia tau ai te mauri tū, te mauri ora, ki te katoa, haumi e, hui e, tae ki e. Tēnā koutou.
Kia ora, thank you. Right, we'll just do a little bit of health and safety welcome members of the public into the gallery and those online. In terms of unlike the event of emergency, on hearing the alarm, we'll just leave the building through the green signs we entered in past. We'll evacuate down to the assembly area, which is next to the clock tower in the square Te Marae. In terms of health and safety, it is a non-smoking and vaping building. You'll need to go outside to do that. Unlike the event of needing a defibrillator, that is located outside the entrance in the customer services area on the ground floor. Any incidences, please just report those to our administration here. Okay, right, colleagues, we'll get back to our main order of business, which was our deliberations around number 2G. And we are now through to the G3, which is around the citywide shared pathway. And this is around the pathways budget and that council reduced program. So we've got two here. We'll do the first one. They're both very similar.
Before we do that, do you want an update on where you're at?
Okay, all right. The officers just wanted to give us an update of where we are. Can I perhaps, who's going to do that?
Okay, morning
Scott.
all. I think that one's me, Scott Manser, Finance Manager. My modeller's just out of the office sorting out another wee issue at the moment, but the rates, I'll compare to the table that's in section 5.8. The rates increases by year are as follows as of last night. 11.3, 9.8, 9.9, 8.7, 7.5, 6.1, 5.7, 5.9, 4 and 4.1. That are the figures including the additional debt repayment.
Okay, and then on the other side, you've got your debt to revenue ratios.
Correct. Those are a little bit hard to read, and I will work on that. And the other table that we got requested to, we're just chasing the budget issue question that we couldn't resolve yesterday.
So can I just, with the debt to revenue, the top one is the yearly figure and is a cumulative. Is the cumulative figure underneath? Why is there two?
So the top figure is the policy limit. So that's the 250% that
Yes.
Council resolved earlier.
Yeah.
The middle row is the debt to revenue ratio with the additional debt repayments included. And the bottom row is the debt to revenue ratio without the additional debt repayments included.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, thank you. All right, we'll just take that sense check at some stage. Councillor Johnson.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question, if I could. What is it that's pushed the rates up from 11.1 where we were yesterday to 11.3? Is that the rural discount being less?
No, it's the additional youth funding that's been put in, it's the food security policy, it's the slight tweak to the capital programs, it's all of those resolutions that were passed yesterday combined.
Okay, so what effect are you able to separate out the effect of the rural discount?
There is no effect to the percentage increase based on the rural. That's how we
Oh,
allocate
okay.
the rates
Cool.
across properties.
Thank you, that's awesome.
Councillor Barrett.
Thanks. Probably starting with a question of clarification, then around where we are. I was just back in here.
Okay. Councillor Naylor.
Similarly to Councillor Johnson, I'm a little bit perplexed about the 11.3 because I thought we only added 63,000 in yesterday,
Stormwater as well?
but we offsetted that with deferring another thing, I thought.
So there was two parts to stormwater. There was section 5.23 of the report, as well as the additional resolution in, excuse me 1 second while I get that part of the paper. 5.1, no, sorry. $5.19 as well. So that's another 150,000. There's 100,000 from 5.23, as well as the minor tweaks to the capital program. Whilst it hasn't changed the percentage as outlined in the paper, all of these cumulative little pieces will actually start to move that percentage by the rounding within the detail.
So didn't we reduce the capital program yesterday though?
Yes, however, we also slightly tweaked the Kiki Whenua program as well, so that has come in and we brought money forward from year 2. So there are some minor tweaks there, and we'll work on providing an update to the total capital program as soon as Grant's down here in the morning.
Thanks for that.
All right. Thanks, Scott, and we'll probably check in after morning break and perhaps after lunch and then after afternoon tea and then after tea and tomorrow as well. So all of that is in colleagues, all of that is in your hands. So we'll kick on and hopefully at some pace. So this is the first one around this morning around shared pathways, and we'll start with the top one, but there is another recommendation if it fails. That councils reduce the Palmerston to Fielding component of Program 2057 Citywide Shared Pathways, New and Link improvements by 9 million, and adjust investment timing to enable the delivery of Palmerston to Fielding Shared Pathway by the 30th of June 2026. And that's moved by Councillor Barrett, seconded by Councillor Hancock, and I'll go to you, Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, and perhaps if I could start with a question, because it may be on quite a few of our minds. I would like to understand what the implications would be if the budget did drop to 6 million if we ended up in that alternate recommendation.
Mr Mayor, Councillor, the paper we recently brought back to Council detailed the Palmerston North Fielding shared path where we identified what we described as a minimum viable product at about $13 million. So that was a reduction of about 9 million. That was made up of different sections, and the best information we have at the moment is that the Palmerston North to Bunnythorpe sections of that would be about $8.4 million. The Bunnythorpe to Fielding section would be about $4.8 million, and so the total path would be about $13.2 million in round numbers. The $6 million resolution, as I understand it, is completing the Palmerston North to Bunnythorpe sections only, and the best information we have would be that's currently about $8.4 million.
Great, thank you. That's helpful. I'll rise to introduce the G3 recommendation. What's pleasing to me about both of these recommendations is it does recognize that this project is a priority and needs to go ahead in some form. And I think before us is the question of what form that goes in. I would urge you to take the approach recommended here, which is around the minimum viable product that actually gets us from the city to Fielding. I mean, how foolish would it be to have a path that goes almost to the point of connection and then doesn't, and then carries on. It's kind of like building a road to both sides of the Manawatu River and then forgetting to build the bridge. So very much in favor that we do actually take the approach that provides us that connection through to Fielding. Currently, there is no safe way to go by bike between the city and Fielding. There simply isn't. And on an e-bike these days, that would be about a half-hour journey. That's actually a reasonable commute. So we are actually talking about a very useful part of the transport network, as well as something that would be a significant recreational asset. For those of you that have been around this table for a while, you'll recall that this has been in our budgets in various spaces for various amounts of time. And I'm very much of the view that it is time now to get on with it. We have in fact seen that MDC has completed their portion, and it's high time that we got on with ours. So I would urge your support around this. We need it to be to that standard so that it is a year-round link, that it's all weather, and that it's suitable for the needs of the community. The final point that I'd make around completing the link is that we heard from Te Araroa Trust. The critical component of this is actually from Bunnythorpe on, and so if we ended up in a situation where we were seeking the $6 million, we would be flying directly in the face of meeting the critical request from that trust, who has put a huge amount of effort into establishing a global tourism product that just happens to go through our community, and we should do our bit to ensure that that global tourism product is well served for those traveling here. So I would urge you to support that on this basis. This would see it done in 2 years, which I think is a reasonable time to deliver something that Bunnythorpe and the northern suburbs of our city have been waiting for years and years. So please do support this, colleagues. Thank you.
Could I just ask a question, please, of you as the mover? So it's ring fencing this at 9 million, and it's spending 4.5 in year one and 4.5 in year two. Oh, sorry.
So it's reducing by 9, so it's coming down to the 13.2, which is the minimum viable product that we've gotten quoted from officers, and it's seeing that delivered over 2 years. So it would be, our component of it obviously would be half of that, and the other half coming from NZTA.
Okay, so can I just get another question of officers? So we've got funding for this from NZTA?
Apologies, I didn't introduce myself the first time around. Glenn O'Connor, Transport and Development Manager. Our funding for NZTA is sitting with NZTA at the moment, or a funding request through the Regional Land Transport Plan. Our transport budgets are assumed to have funding by NZTA. We won't have that assumption confirmed till possibly August, September of this calendar year, but currently our transport budgets assume the subsidy.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Could I also ask a question of the mover? I just want to get an understanding of what happens to the Ashurst link in your recommendation, as it's not mentioned there. So would the total budget reduce from 55 million to 13.2, with Ashurst being reevaluated, or would that sit in the back years of the budget?
This doesn't address the Ashurst side of the budget. We haven't had really information coming to council yet about optionality there or anything, so it simply leaves it as is, and you know, we're so far away from a capital spend there that it's to some extent neither here nor there. What happens in terms of timing on that side until we actually get some permissions.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I just really want to ensure that this recommendation is well supported. It's a practical response to something which has actually been sitting on our books for quite a number of years. And of course, MDC have been to us on a number of occasions and have urged us to complete our share of it. And we appear to have been procrastinating on that for some time. In terms of a practical response, this actually provides us with $9 million in terms of savings around our CapEx expenditure. And I just want to perhaps just tie this back into, we actually did have some submissions, particularly Mandy Shaw, who came and spoke to us, a Bunnythorpe resident, and she said she likes to take her children cycling, but of course to do so she actually has to put everything in the car and come to Palmerston North to actually use shared pathways. And if for Bunnythorpe residents, this really is a very important part of connecting their community with both Fielding and also Palmerston North. And as has been pointed out by Councillor Barrett, is that a half-hour commute from Fielding to Palmerston North or vice versa is actually something that is very doable, and we need to be doing what we can to ensure that we've actually got some alternate modes to encourage cycling between the two centres. It will benefit both Palmerston North and Fielding. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. I can't support this. The feedback we got from our community was, we can't afford what you're proposing. Please slow the spending down. This increases the spending in year 1 and 2 from what's proposed in our draft. So what I'm wanting to do here today is respond to the overwhelming feedback that people are saying that they can't afford their rates. Certainly I'd be more interested in supporting the second recommendation. I reminded myself on some of the, I just wanted to refresh myself on some of the submissions last night. One of the quotes in one of the submissions was, "I am struggling with the cost of living and have nothing left to spare. A rates increase will literally take food out of my kids' mouths, which seems completely counterproductive to having a thriving economy and community." Those are the sort of comments that I want to keep front of mind in the decision making today. So I can't support this.
Councillors, look, I think Councillor Barrett and Councillor Hancock, possibly Councillor Wood and myself, obviously want this to go ahead, but not at all costs. I remind you, this will be 12 times the cost of what MDC, and I had a flippant comment in the chamber last time, we should get them to build it. And my apologies to officers, but I just think we're gold plating this. I absolutely do. And we're speeding up, which is, to Councillor Naylor's comments, absolutely against what the submitters have said. So I strongly advise you to have a look at 2. I want to give you some evidence of where I've got to with that. Look, this has been on the books, not for years and years and years, for 4 years. It's the Ashurst link that's been on the books, for those who are a little bit new around the table, for years and years and years. And that is fraught with property issues. We'll come to that later. MDC have spoken to us twice on it. The Mayor has come and presented on that. And yes, it is a big thing for them. It's a difficult route for us to complete, so I don't think we've been procrastinating. It's just hard to do, hence the cost. I remind you that they spent 1.1, or just about 1.15, to complete their section, which is slightly less than ours. It is straighter and it has less water crossings. So I went and spoke to some engineering firms about this. I showed the plans. I saw the civils firm that did this work for MDC. We absolutely can do this cheaper. We absolutely can. So to spend 13 million, I think, is ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. Yes, we're going to have to spend some money, and it's going to be more expensive. So having a budget of 6 spread over 3 years enables the pathway to be built in a timely manner, but also in an economical manner. And I would strongly advise the CE and officers to go and seek not just our contractor of choice, but some other people. And actually, it's a pathway. This is the cost we're putting up of like producing a road. Also, can we de-spec it a bit? It doesn't need lights everywhere. It doesn't need seats everywhere. It doesn't need fantastically designed bridges. It can be, as NDCs, quite minimal. So I would like it to be de-spec'd and in an affordable manner that we can get there. And look, if we have to do some lights and other things, we can do all that later on. In the same way, I remind you, we used limestone pathways along the river for 20 years. So please, we are taking a very, very gold-plated. I mean, we started with 23 million on this. Jeepers. And listen to the submissions. The second recommendation will deliver us something. Yes, it'll be de-spec'd, I admit that, but it's achievable. So I won't support this, and I strongly advise you to not support it and look at the second. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I've just got a couple of questions, if I may. The first one is about the NZTA funding. If that was to not come through, I mean, either Councillor Barrett's recommendation or your one would both attract potentially NZTA funding. If that was to not come through in August, September, would we not then go ahead, or would we be up for the whole cost?
Oh, look, I'm unsure. We'd have to ask officers that.
Through you, Mr Mayor, perhaps I'll start. The finance strategy certainly assumes that where we have assumed external funding from other sources, that if we don't obtain that funding, then we wouldn't be continuing with the project without bringing it back into the chamber for further decision making, because we have to keep in mind our own debt limits at the same time.
Okay, thank you for that. And then the other question is, in your recommendation, Mr Mayor, where you've suggested that the budget be reduced from 55 million to 6 million, does that mean that we're not then, we're taking Ashurst out of the plan, that we're no longer doing Ashurst?
We're not doing Ashurst in years 1 to 3. We're re-evaluating it in year 4.
But we're essentially getting rid of the Ashurst budget.
In the LTP at this stage?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Re-evaluating it in year 4.
All right.
Because of the property issues.
Okay, thanks for that clarification.
Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, Mr Mayor, look, sorry to just come back and to speak on a second point. Just really a matter of clarification. My understanding is the 13.2 million, that figure is actually without any lights or seats, as has been stated. And the other thing which I think requires some clarification is that if we were to lime chip that pathway, that would actually provide us with $1 million in savings, but then that increases the OPEX subsequently, so that is not necessarily a cheaper option for council. Thank you.
Based on our officers' estimates, yes. Councillor Wood.
Apologies to do this again, but I just wanted to hear what your ruling was regarding Standing Order 2.13.5. Members may speak only once.
Yep. You reminded me when Councillor Hancock got up and spoke, and I got wrong advice yesterday, so we can only speak once to it. So you've had your go, Councillor. So we can only speak to it once, and my apologies, I should have ruled on that late yesterday, and apologies for that. But so, yes, all right. Okay. Right, a reply back to you, Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, colleagues, for comments on this, and would reiterate that the value proposition here is around actually completing from Palmerston North to Fielding, which we would not see with the alternate recommendation. It's around ensuring that we have some opportunity to progress useful negotiations with Ashurst on the Ashurst link at the time when they would become available to us, and that it is, say, very much not a like-for-like comparison when we start talking about the very easy journey that MDC had on their path vis-a-vis the challenges that we have in actually negotiating the terrain from the end of their path through to the city. So we should, in fact, ensure that we do it once and do it right, which is what this proposal is about. Going to the alternate, not actually connecting the field, basically gives you a path to Bunnythorpe that then puts you into a death trap between there and Kung Fu Corner, which is really not what we want to be doing to any part of our community. So would urge you to support this so that we get it through to Fielding, done once, done right. Thank you.
All right, we will, please. So it's G3, the first one. And that has failed. 6 votes for and 9 against. No, we're not showing who votes. Oh, sorry. No. Okay, all right, we'll come back to it. All right, the next alternative motion to this is that Council reduce program 2057 citywide shared path to a maximum of 6 million, excluding inflation total, completing Bunnythorpe to Palmerston City at a cost of 2 million per year in years 1 to 3, with Ashurst Link to be re-evaluated in year 4. That's moved by myself, second by Councillor Wood. Councillors, I won't go through the same, although I will just say to officers that there does need to be a look at the scope and spec of this. Commentary around limestone. Again, I just come back to the river pathway was there for 20 years. And Ahamati is still parts of it are limestone. In Te Mairahine, the square here, we've had limestone. We've just got to be, I appreciate that we want to have it at a suitable level and everything else, but we sometimes need to cut our cloth too. Also, 3 metre wide pathway. We just need to explore whether that could be reduced by to 2.5 and the cost savings that could possibly come from that. Also, the engineering of the bridges and where they're being made, etc. So I think there is ways of doing this, and also it's spreading it over 3 years. So we do deliver something for Bunnythorpe, but in a meaningful way that just is respectful to the investment that ratepayers will be making in this over the next 3 years. Ashurst Link, re-evaluating that with a commitment to looking at that again in year 4. We can only do what we can do at this stage. So there's property issues there. We're going to try and work through those. I know there's a report coming back to Council in coming weeks, but I think it will highlight the complexity of what we've got there. So I ask you to support this, please. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks. Just a question to you as the mover. So just to clarify that your intent is not to connect through to Fielding, but only to Bunnythorpe?
Yes. I don't know where Fielding came into it.
just to confirm then, we have heard from the mayor of Fielding that they do want to see a connection.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, thanks, that's where it's come from.
So I've lost what are you asking? What was-
I'm trying to understand if we're only going from here to Bunnythorpe or if we're going to connect on up to.
Okay, I see, through to, Campbell's Road part of it.
Yes.
Yes, that is the intention, yes.
Ah, okay, right, that's very helpful to clarify, for me, thank you. I think that was my primary question at this stage of you, thank you.
Councillor Bowen.
Similarly, question please, Mr Mayor, and thank you for that clarification because that completely escaped me. My question is about your intention with the Ashurst link in this recommendation. And you referenced a report that's coming, but is your intention that all work stops on the Ashurst link because there'll be no budget to do that?
Yeah, my understanding, there's no work going on at the moment in that space. If I could get somebody from infrastructure to confirm that.
No planning, no reporting to council?
The report to council breaking down the cost and how the Ashurst pathway will still be able to come ahead, that's from officers. However, yes, the implication from this is we would have no budget, so we wouldn't be able to do any work towards land acquisition or notice of requirement or anything in that space. So that would all stop.
If I could just follow up on that, Mr Mayor. Obviously, we all know this has been a difficult process, but did you have any hope of being able to progress this within the next 4 years?
The current scope in the draft includes money in the first 3 years to be progressing a lot of that work on the Ashurst pathway. Construction for that was not scheduled to start until about year 5 and 6 onwards. So for the first 3, 4, 5 years was all getting prepared to be able to do construction.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Wood.
Mr Mayor, I was just wondering if perhaps we change the wording to completing the Fielding to Palms North link, if that's our intention, so that it's clear to officers. We're not suggesting it stops at Bunnythorpe.
I'm comfortable with that.
Thank you.
Councillor Dennison.
Mr Mayor, just without complicating it, I wondered if whether you take out that last comma with the Ashurst link to be re-evaluated and just have a recommendation just on this piece of path, but I'm just posing that so it doesn't complicate.
What, deleting it totally?
Just take off that and deal with that Ashurst link separately in a separate recommendation.
Oh, okay. All right, we can do that. Do you want to do that?
Well, if we're just going to do the same thing, it seems silly not to just get it done now, but if that's what you'd like to do, Mr Mayor.
Well, it's not really what I want to do, but it's a suggestion
no, I'm just
from...
suggesting.
Yeah, no,
It's up
I'll
to you.
keep it all together.
Thank you. That's what I was inquiring.
All right. I'm not going to... I've spoken enough. We'll vote, please. Oh, so I thought you'd made comments. Okay. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My apologies for not being in the queue soon enough. With reluctance, I'm in a position to support everything up to the comma. I think it's been useful to have it clarified that we will in fact be committing to a connection to Fielding. I see that the words on the screen have yet to change, but no doubt that's about to happen. What I'm much less comfortable about with this proposal is the wee fishhook that sits just beyond the comma, which puts the absolute kibosh on any sort of progress on a high-value project that has been frankly held to ransom for a long time by a very few. And I hate to see us lose the opportunity to continue to pursue those opportunities to complete the Riverside link to Ashurst. And so I will be moving a recommendation or an amendment that we delete everything after the comma. I think these are two very separate issues, and we would be wise to make a decision around completing to Bunnythorpe, and then if we want to go and make a further decision about what does or doesn't happen to Ashurst, but they are two very separate decisions, very separate processes. So I will formally move an amendment that we delete everything after the comma and seek a seconder on that.
Okay. We deal with the amendment first. I'll just get that up. So, Councillor Bowen, you're next in queue. Are you talking to the amendment?
Yes, speaking to the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can the first half of this, but this second half is concerning to me when I reflect on the submissions that we had about the opportunity that the Ashurst link provides for our economic and tourism products of the city. Hopefully, Te Ahua Tūranga will come online next year. An important part of that project was its cycling and walkway and the access into Te Apiti Manotu Gorge. To not be thinking about that link through from Ashurst to the city until year 4, I think, is a hugely missed opportunity. So a separate decision about the budget lines maybe for another day, but this decision is about Fielding to Palmerston North. I don't think it helps us to conflate Ashurst into that when it deserves its own discussion. And so I'll be pleased to support the substantive recommendation if we can take out that last few words.
Now, everybody in the queue, I assume, is speaking about the amendment around Ashurst Pathway. Councillor Harpiter.
I'm disappointed that it's been taken out because sometimes we have to be pragmatic, and the pathway to Ashurst has been a thorn in our side, and we can't do a lot about it. We've got 5 landowners that are not going to budge, and we can't do anything. We don't own that land. They're owned by other people, and this has been pragmatic by putting it in and saying we'll deal with it in year 4. So what the Mayor and the Seconder were doing were trying to be pragmatic, and that's all they were trying to do. So I'm disappointed that this has been taken out. So it's a matter of being pragmatic. So just disappointed, so I'll vote against the amendment.
Councillors, I mean, they're both pathways, so they are connected. So there is a connection, absolutely. But actually, it's about what can we complete? And and again, due respect to officers, but I think you're being incredibly optimistic to think you're going to purchase a whole lot of land at extraordinary prices when if we waited to year 4, we might be given it. So I really do think there needs to be some pragmatic approach to this. You know, we got some poor advice around Public Works Act. We can't take this land. It's owned by other people. And look, I get all the reasons why they should give it to us, and I'm hoping they will, or some of them will. But we've got, and it just won't pass the sniff test of the Public Works Act. So you're just wasting money and resources. Let's complete what we can complete and deal with what we can deal with and what we've got total control over. Plus, the cost for the Ashurst that's in our budgets, again, it's like a bit of road. It's 30 million. It's ridiculous. And we just have to cut our cloth. So I agree, there's huge opportunities, as Councillor Bowen said, and yes, we want to realise those opportunities, but we also need to be pragmatic. Can we get there in year 4, and then as the officers have, year 5, 6 and 7, have a pathway that goes through there? The river's changing too, as well. Some of the land that I've had a look at that was where the pathway was going to go is no longer there. It's in the river. So, you know, we just need to be mindful of the changing nature of the pathway and river as well. So I strongly advise you to look, this is not killing it, it's just dealing with it in a more timely and pragmatic manner. So I advise you not to agree to the amendment. It just sets us up for much more cost as well. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. It's a question really. So my understanding is that this budget line covers both Fielding to Palmerston North and Ashurst to Palmerston North. Is that correct?
Program 2057?
Yeah.
Yes.
So by reducing that programme to a maximum of 6 million and determining that the 6 million go towards the Fielding to Palmerston North City, I don't understand how deleting that second part makes any difference, because the first part reduces the budget anyway, doesn't it?
Yes, it does, but it still enables officers, and we've got to be crystal clear with the officers, that they don't go and start buying a whole lot of land at Ashurst because they can't get the Public Works Act to work.
But there's no budget to do that if we do the first bit, is there?
There will be, because there's money linked in for the Ashurst side.
But and so this is what I need clarifying.
Yeah.
My understanding of your your amendment.
Yes, I see where you're going.
Was that
It's
you would-
ring fenced to 6.
You've
Yeah.
reduced that budget down to
Yes.
6 and ring fenced it for Fielding to Palmerston North. So
Yeah.
I don't see how there could be any spending on the Ashurst with or without that second part.
You
That's
are
what I
right.
want to check. Yeah,
I believe you are right.
yeah.
And I'm getting
officers-
nods from officers. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't. Well, then I'll just make a comment. I don't think that the amendment makes any difference to the effect of this motion. So I will ask the mover and seconder to have a think about that.
Councillor Wood.
Councillor Johnson hit the nail on the head with what I was about to say. I mean, whether we have that link or not, or whether we have that comment at the end or not, at the end of the day, it's still out of the same budget. So if there's only $6 million there, ring-fenced for the Fielding section, effectively taking that last section out means we're just killing Ashurst full stop. We don't look at it again, it's done. So what the intention here is that we go, we're not going to do it for the next 3 years, and we're not going to budget for it, and then in 4 years' time, the next LTP, we can look at putting a new program in, if that's where our community's at. So effectively, by taking it out, you're removing our ability to then re-look at the Ashurst link in the next LTP. The reason that this amendment's done together is because both those programs are in the same budget. So I appreciate that Fielding to Ashurst and, Palmerston North to Ashurst, Palmerston North to Fielding are two separate issues, but they are in the same budget, so we have to deal with them together. Because if we separate it out and don't deal with that in this clause, well then all we do is leave it in the wind. The comment I would make on the Palmerston North to Ashurst section is, yes, we had submitters who said they wanted it. We also had a lot of submitters where this was one of the programs they identified as not an essential or not something that they believed we needed to do. And a lot of comments that said, look, defer it for the next 3 years, get through the tough time, and then we can have another look at it. There's no point in investing officer time, energy, and council and ratepayer money into a project that quite possibly isn't going to happen. So let's give it 3 years, let's get one of these pathways done, and then see what the environment is, see what the lay of the land is, and deal with it in 3 years' time. So I think if we take this out, we're doing more harm to the project for Palmerston North to Ashurst than if we leave it in. I think it's better we look at it in 3 years' time. So I'll be voting against the amendment and supporting the original motion.
Councillor Naylor.
I'm going to vote against the amendment because I actually think it's much more clear for us to leave that in. It indicates our intent that we will be reviewing that in year 4. It doesn't muddy the waters for someone else to come and put another amendment up to do a new piece of work in the next 3 years for that to happen. I think part of this process is about prioritising, and I think history shows that we just need to be very clear with our recommendations in terms of the intent, so it's very clear. The other thing is, if we've made this, I think year 4 is the right time to reconsider the Ashurst link. And aside from that, if something changes with any of those land parcels between here and Ashurst in the next 3 years, there's nothing to stop officers from bringing that back to the table. So I think for me, I'll oppose the amendment because I think it's clearer to leave it in.
All right. Councillor Wright, a reply to you.
Thank you, colleagues, for your comments, and really interesting to see how words get interpreted, and to some extent, in my view at least, misinterpreted. The concern that I would have with totally removing the opportunity for any action, which is what the substantive does, is that we would have no conversations, no interactions, no opportunities to actually pick up, as the last comment from Councillor Naylor just alluded to. How would we know if there was an opportunity? Because everything goes on ice and offline for 3 years. And I would hate to think that we would miss opportunities along the way. So that's why I would strongly urge that we do actually proceed with this amendment so that there can be those ongoing discussions and hopefully some opportunities realized within the next 3 years that can see us actually complete actually the key part of the overall network that delivers the value proposition around what we see in Te Ahu Turonga, what we see in Te Apiti, what we see in the thriving city network. So we need to make sure that that is a live conversation over the next 3 years rather than killing it off for 3 years for the want of potentially some lost opportunities, and it'd be very disappointing to see those lost. So I'd urge you to support the amendment so that we can keep those conversations live. Absolutely, if anything financial comes out of those conversations, obviously it comes back here because cutting the budget to $6 million and dedicating that to that space. So we need those conversations live and to be able to realize opportunities when they arise, which is what this is about. So please do support. Thank you.
Okay, councillors, the amendment. And has failed 3 votes for and 12 against. Now we'll go back to the substantive. And we've discussed this enough, but just in final comment, it's just really around prioritising and having a pragmatic approach and a rescope of the project Fielding to Palmy pathway and focusing on delivery. The conversations around issues can still continue offline, and I don't think officers would not bring us anything. But I just don't want to, I want to focus on this one pathway that we can complete. So can you vote, please? And that has passed 14 votes for and 1 against. Okay, we'll move through to our next and this is G5. It's from Councillor Wood, seconded by Councillor Hart. Council defer program 2122 City Centre Streets for People upgrade to years 4 and 5. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I won't speak long on this because we've already had these debates in the chamber a number of times regarding this. You all know my preferences with this program for it to be deleted in its entirety, but I also want to say I'm open-minded. We haven't seen a design on this program in the last year, and I know work is going on with the steering group and with other stakeholders for it to come back to us, and so I'm open to seeing what we might be able to do in this space. But at the moment, there's $10 million effectively, or $10.4 million in the budget for the first 3 years. This was a commonly identified program throughout submissions as something that we could wait for. The city centre is working reasonably well as it is. There are opportunities, of course, through our maintenance and renewal budgets to make minor improvements, but let's park this program for the next 3 years and look at it as part of the next LTP. So I hope you'll support this as a sensible compromise on how we can look at continuing this work, not killing it dead, but not in the next 3 years, to give ourselves some time to get through the economic situation that we're in.
Asking a question.
What is the clarity needed around design work?
Okay, yeah. Councillor Bowen.
Question, please, Mr. Mayor. If I could ask officers about the implications of moving programmes from years 1, 2 and 3 into 4 to 5, reserving my right to speak later.
Okay, that might be me. Apologies. The implications. So the first $10 million was doing the section from the Main Street roundabout through, budget permitting, all the way through to Rangatiki Street, and maybe even being able to reach Cuba, and doing that whole sort of dog leg there. The implications of this would simply be that we wouldn't do that. The only other consideration I could give elected members today would be, we have talked to Safari Group about aligning that strip between Broadway and Main Street to their development, and it's the current timing as proposed aligns with their construction timing they've given us. So years 2 and 3. So the implication would be that they would go ahead and do their construction, and we would then come back potentially after that and then do the road outside their new hotel.
In your conversations with Safari, have you floated this possibility with them, that our investment might not align with their timing?
I certainly haven't. I'm not sure whether any other officers have had those conversations, but I suspect not, because the timing and the draft LTP still lined up.
So accepting you haven't talked to them directly about it, are you able to advise what that likely impact will be on their development proposal? What does that mean for them?
Can officers answer that?
I don't know.
Look, we can't answer that in terms of the how that might affect their investment decisions. What we can say is, I think they have been provided a number of supportive comments about the idea that there are streetscape upgrades that complement their investment.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Mr.
Councillor Johnson.
Just a question to the mover, if I may, Mr. Mayor. So you've identified programme 2122, and you've said that we should defer it to years 4 to 5. But there's money in the budget in years 6 to 8. What are you intending happens to that? Would that also be deferred for 3 years? Like, are we moving the whole programme 3 years out, or are we only moving the first part 3 years out? And if we're only moving the first part 3 years out, I would suggest you might want to just define that more precisely in your motion.
No, that's a very good question, Councillor Johnson. The intention is that we're only moving the first 3 years out, so you'd have a tighter delivery period in the back end of the LTP, and so I'm happy for that to be amended if the seconder is no. What are you happy for, Councillor? To defer the whole block?
No.
Okay, well then
Well, I will just, well, I'll make a comment then while the mover and seconder are thinking about it. I would have been prepared to support this moving out as a whole programme 3 years. So in other words, deferring the whole programme by 3 years. But I'm not very keen to only defer the first half, because I think that bunches it all up together too much. And the one advantage I would see from this is if we were to move the whole programme out, we would get some saving in capital spend over the 10 years. And the other thing I would say is I'm not too keen to vote for motions that are not clear in their intent, because who knows what we're actually voting for.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now, in light of those comments, Councillor Naylor is happy to second deferring the entire programme by 3 years, which would defer the entire budget line 3 years later than it currently is, which would have the effect that Councillor Johnson just outlined of reducing the scale of the capital programme within the LTP. So if we could move, defer programme 212, City Centre Streets People Upgrade, in its entirety by 3 years. If Councillor Naylor is happy with that wording. Yep. All right, thank you.
Okay, so now is the council defer program 2122 City Centre upgrade in its entirety by 3 years. Okay, thank you. Look, councillors, I've normally been a real supporter of the Streets for People upgrade, but again, I'm just coming back to the prioritisation of what can happen. I know a little bit about the hotel, and I think if something was to speed up, there's nothing wrong with something being coming back to us if it needed to be. I also want to challenge a bit of the scope of what we have there around the design. We're ripping up perfectly good tarmac in some places. We are in Broadway, things need a clean rather than just a total revamp. And I do think that there is some rescope that could be required there. We're cutting down trees, we're doing some stuff which I question in terms of the scope of it. So in saying that, I'm fine to have a defer for 3 years. If the hotel is starting to be constructed in year 2 and there is a real need for us to move, then something can come back at that time. So again, it's around being pragmatic, focusing on what we can deliver as a city, and I'm talking everything here, and again, just responding to the submissions as well, which have been a little bit critical of us perhaps pushing ahead with this upgrade at speed. I think it's worthy with a rescope, but in time. Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've just really got a question ready for council officers, if I may. And that is, yesterday I asked a question around the, as we move things out through the program, I really want to have an understanding of the impacts of that in terms of the deliverability of those programs. And of course, we may end up with a very large amount in a particular year, say for example, going from $190 odd million capital capex in 1 year, and because we keep pushing stuff out with actually not understanding the implications of that, that could perhaps even double. And so therefore, the capacity for the community and for council to deliver that becomes undeliverable. So can I get a comment, please, from council officers in terms of the implications of this particular motion? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. We don't quite have that 10-year capital dollar value, but we'll have that by the end of morning tea. And now that Grant's here, we will be able to do the rates and the debt to revenue ratios as we move through the motions.
Probably just adding to that, if I can, from a deliverability standpoint, I think as Chris mentioned yesterday, there is a difference between dollar value or capital dollar and deliverability. It probably would come down to what the makeup of those projects in those individual years would be. The example of a $50 million library, for instance, is one project, and we could structure that. That takes a lot less resource from a deliverability standpoint than 50 smaller ones that equal the same amount of dollars.
All right, thank you. Councillor Naylor.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very happy to second and support this. This is a program that only even got stayed in the draft with the support of a one-person majority around the table, and I think the community has been really clear that we need to defer non-essential items. And I do think, in terms of the feedback that I've heard from the community, they see this as very much a non-essential improvement at this time.
Councillor Apata.
I know I've been flip-flapping around over this one, but I can't support this. The reason I can't support it because of the Safari Group. We've got a developer coming in, going to put a hotel in the middle of our city centre, and in year 2 of this, and putting development into our city centre is what we want and what we're crying out for, and we are stopping our streets from being upgraded at the same time. So I can't support this because I think if we're not rolling our sleeves up and doing what we should be doing as a city, then we shouldn't even be asking for the development to happen. So I'm not going to support it because I think we should be doing this and carrying on doing what we've said we were going to do to the developer, probably when we promised to do it. So I'm not going to support this going forward.
Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I should have left my microphone on earlier, but really I guess I have some real concerns about this kind of approach to planning in the city. In terms of our CapEx, there has got to be some coherency and some alignment with what is actually going on external to what the business of what council does. And Councillor Harper has actually pointed out to a very, very good reason to ensure that we've actually got that alignment with investors in the city. This is really about supporting the businesses and the vibrancy of the heart of our city, and to just kind of sort of just put this off without any kind of without coherency and without understanding the implications of that, I think is just foolhardy. So those are my comments. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I won't be supporting it.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And obviously you gather from my comments that, from my questions, that my concern was about the impact on the proposed development in that part of the city. But I'm persuaded by your comments that there will be an opportunity, should the Safari Group project timing need us to reconsider this, there'll be an opportunity to bring that back through the chamber. And I am also convinced that this programme could benefit from some rescoping. And I don't say that easily. I've long been a supporter of this project. I think there are significant benefits to the vibrancy, livability, time that people spend in the central city of the kind of project that we're looking at. But I think my reflection is that we have overspec'd some of it, and this might provide a useful opportunity to slightly rescope, a light touch rescope maybe, but also to use this time to align this programme with the inward investment. Councillor Harper is absolutely right. We need to leverage that inward investment, and we know the principle is that public investment leads and private investment follows. Well, we're going to test and see if it still works the other way around, which concerns me a little bit. But I think in the situation that we're in, I'm prepared to give that one a go, so I'll support this.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and this is an interesting and finely balanced one for me. I'll acknowledge that first up. Probably my principal concerns around us taking this approach is that I think we might start to develop with the development community and with the investment community a bit of a reputation as a bait and switch kind of council, where we've got money in budgets and then it all disappears and then it may come back or it may not, and let's have a chat. And I don't think that that's actually a reputation that we want as a council when we look at the private investment needs in the heart of our city. There is a desperate lack of private investment coming into the heart of our city, which is why we don't see a vibrant city centre housing, we don't see a vibrant city centre retail, and it has been a tremendous challenge and will only get more challenging if we say, no, we're the kind of council that has money and then doesn't, and then may or may not. I think it's quite a false economy potentially. I'm definitely up for that rescoping conversation, and I think it's one that if we're genuine about, we might not be saying we had to wait a whole 3 years to do the rescoping. I think the rescoping could actually be done quite effectively in 6 months, and we could be turning investment on in the next year or two. So I'm a bit concerned that this is a can being kicked a bit too far down the road for reasons that will come back to haunt us through a bit of false economy, really, in terms of where we might get to in terms of driving the private investment into the heart of the city, which is what needs to happen. So up for the rescoping, but on balance, not able to support this because I think the ripple effect is too much.
Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Overspec is one way of putting streets for people. I'd say over the top is another. Making it stretch out for 3 years makes IOSRA absolutely no difference at all. And, we need to listen to the people. Times are extremely tough. After all, the Safari Group's going to pull down half the blooming building, so I would have thought common sense, do the footpaths after. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been a bit of a champion around doing the streetscape program over the years, but right now I'm actually happy to have my name supporting this recommendation to defer it for 3 years. The economic environment is tough, and we've heard that with many speakers, and let alone the submissions that come through. And then there's the doability, the contractor availability. When we last did Cuba Street, the start time got pushed out several times, and then it prolonged, and then the result, the quality of it, we had to pull back on the surface on the pavement and the road surface because the contractor availability isn't there. And so I'm just thinking, talking about pragmatic, I think this is brings some wisdom to it. I don't think it's a flip-flopping. I think it's just a response of us listening to the community. And that's not just the residents in the urban environment. This is some of the businesses that we're actually stretching to in this economic environment. They don't want disruption out the front door while we're doing all the streetscape and all the noise and the mud and the delays. And I think people just want a confidence that we are slowing things down, we're responding to the economic conditions and listening to our community. And so I'm very happy to defer all of this for 3 years. Thank you.
Right, a reply, Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the debate and appreciate your comments, colleagues, particularly around making it clear as to what exactly we're trying to do with this amendment. The first thing I'd say regarding the Safari investment is two things. One is we had a conversation last night about this word promised, and we said actually anything in our draft long-term plan is not promised. It's up for debate, it's up for consultation, it's up for community choice. And so I appreciate that we should do investment, and that comments might have been made at Safari Group that we're looking at this space. But if we have gone out and they've made investment choices because we have promised them we are going to do something, well then that is our fault because we should not have been doing that. At the end of the day, this is a community document and a community plan, and if our community comes and tells us that they actually need us to slow down with this work, not just this work in particular, but slow down with our capital program across the LTP, then I don't think we should be making any promises to commercial entities as to what we would or wouldn't do. In terms of prioritisation, rescope, completely concur with the Mayor's comments, Councillor Bowen and Councillor Dennison. I think there is space for this project to be rescoped, and as I say, I'm open to that. I would like to see investment in the inner city, and my initial proposal probably over a year ago, was that we took this program out and developed a different one that looked purely at refitting the existing street layout, and so a rescoping that might still have some change to the layout, but looks at it doing it in a different way. Very open to that conversation. The concerns of Councillor Hancock's around deliverability are very good ones, and I appreciate it that councillors are having this conversation as we're going through this, rather than making a noose for our own neck by making a whole lot of changes, not understanding the implications. The thing that my understanding from officers is the reason we are coming back on the 10th of June, rather than not coming back till the end of June, is that we have an opportunity to look at what the implications of the changes we make today are, and then we've got a chance that we've still got a few weeks to respond to it, so that we're not effectively sitting at the very end of the process trying to make considerable changes. So I don't know if we're going to get good answers today in terms of what the implications on deliverability and budgets are. I'd like to, but I just don't know if we are. So I have confidence in the officers' response that that's what the 10th of June is for, where we can look at those deliverability and budget implications. And the only other comment I was going to make is, without coherency, well, I believe this is coherent with the feedback we've had from our community. Slow down, do less, let's get through the period we're in, and that's why I've been supportive of deferring this rather than taking it out in its entirety. I see value in the project to a degree. Let's slow it down and look at it again as part of the next LTP. So I hope you'll support it.
All right, we will vote, please, on G5. The Streets for People deferred. That is passed 12 for and 4 against. All right. We'll move through to our next one, which I think is G6. And this is from Councillor Dennison, that Council reduce program 1559 cycling network improvements, 2.5 million excluding inflation in years 2, 4, 6, 8 and 10, and 250,000 excluding inflation in years 1, 3, 5, 7 and 9. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This program number is actually outlined on its budget line on page 38 of the report, but essentially it's a $500,000 figure in year 1, alternating with a $5,100,000 figure in year 2, and then inflation adjusted, alternating year on year. So what this essentially does is bring this completely down in half, from 250 into the 2.5. So halving the budget. So it's not like we're stopping it, we're just having a more pragmatic progress of this budget. So that's responding to the community. The other one is too around the appetite. I don't think we've got the social licence actually to keep rolling out on the same pace with this, unfortunately, with Featherston Street. But there's other examples when we did Pioneer Highway with planter boxes, and there's other examples when we did College Street with taking out the on-street parking for residents. And I feel like the theme has actually got a lot of negativity around it in the community. Also, when we looked at the Featherston Street design, ultimately, I'm really having a little bit of a reflection that the impact on businesses has been quite significant. The impact on residents is yet to be known, because in the Featherston Street design, there was going to be take out all the parking along the road, and then there was no turning bays across the traffic. So there's cars and buses stopping in live traffic in the designs that we're presenting. And I think we need to really tweak that. And then when asked around what success will look like, the answer comes like, unless you do the whole network, we don't know. So we don't even know what the success will look like with the amount of cyclists going through that intersection at Rangatiki Street. And so therefore I think there's some pause and monitoring approach, but yet in this as well, that we also need to just kind of assure ourselves with the amount of significant investment that we're putting into this activity, what the results are actually. And, you know, is it a real benefit, or is the impact on all the negative adverse effects actually compounded to actually the proposition to be really questioned? So I say that not to stop this program, but to halve it back, and that fits in with our headroom and all our rate expectations of our community equally. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Johnson.
Just a question to officers. Is this programme entirely for new cycleways? It's under the capital new / growth.
Yes. So essentially, if you think about the kind of work, not necessarily the same scope for Featherston Street, it's those kind of upgrades.
Is it for cycle networks in new areas of development, like, say, the Cowtree or Kiki Whenua or whatever?
No, it's retrofitting existing streetways.
Okay. Thank you for that. I'll have a quick comment, if that's all right. I am going to support this. I don't usually support cuts to cycling infrastructure, but I think it's reasonable that we try and take a balanced approach to how we approach the budget. And I think all areas are clearly going to have to make some sacrifices. And certainly community took some sacrifices yesterday, and I think cycling is going to have to take some sacrifices today. So I am going to support it. It's not that I don't support cycling network improvements, I do. But I'm hearing that we need to reduce our spending and do things at a slightly slower pace. And I also think we need to be getting more buy-in. Yes, I know there were some submitters that came and said that they supported the cycle improvements, but there were way more submissions from people who said that they didn't support them. And so, rather than just pushing gamely on, I do think we've got to try and have that conversation with the community to see if these things are supported, because I'll be honest, I'm sort of getting a bit beaten down after years and years of, Bear knows what I mean. Let's put it like this. Since the planter box debacle on Pioneer Highway, I've had to do my shopping online because I can't appear in person in the Pioneer Highway New World without somebody hitting me up about it. So I think let's be sensible. We don't have to push on with everything at full pace. I think that this is a reasonable reduction in the circumstances, and so I'm happy to support it.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A few points to address here around this proposal. Start off kind of from the financial point of view. So the overall transport function has $480 million in it, and rightly so. Almost all of those $480 million are spent on spaces for cars, for trucks, and those sort of things. A very, very small fraction is there for space for people on bikes and to retrofit those spaces so that they are safe. So absolutely, I buy the argument that we should be finding some savings. What I don't buy is having a deep targeted cut that knocks out half the investment for a part of the community that very much needs that investment for safety, access, choice, and the other benefits that a safe cycle network delivers. So, you know, what we're talking about here is asking for all of the savings in the transport space effectively to come from a very, very narrow part of it. See that as quite ultimately a focused hit that will knock us back in terms of our ability to be a livable city, a city where people have that free choice around how they're going to move around by foot, bike, bus, car, etc. One of the submitters put it quite well. Every resident in our city has the right to feel safe when moving from one place to another, whether they be motorists, cyclists, or pedestrians, and we should support investments that achieve this. So this kind of cut actually would take us in absolutely the wrong direction. It would be creating a city transport network for some and not for others. It's forcing more bikes off our streets, and it's an approach where actually nobody wins. It puts more lives at risk. Ultimately, it drives up costs because it's even later that we'd see any delivery, and in the meantime, it hurts mobility and choice around mobility. Just a reflection on where we're at in terms of what we hear around different cycle projects. I asked the question, and quite specifically around submissions, how many we got around College Street, and well, it wasn't enough for the officers to even bother remembering. The reality is that these things are points in time, and that yes, there is noise when things change. I would challenge the notion that the vast majority of submitters are opposed to Featherston Street. There's actually no evidence of that. 12% of submitters were opposed to it. 88% were silent. Tells us that there is a specific part of the community that, for various reasons, is quite rightly feeling challenged by that change, but it actually suggests that in the broader sweep of things, there is much bigger issues, and I would argue that having a safe, connected cycle network is one of those. You know, College Street was that same drama. There was angry public meetings. People were sure it was going to be the city's ruin. The reality is we improved the design, it settled in, and now it's working very, very well for zero drama. So don't get caught up in the drama. Focus on the strategic intent and delivering on a livable city. At the current pace, as we've heard, we would only get one link every 2 years. So cutting back on that is, you know, just far too slow in terms of actually retrofitting a safe network into the city, as we're seeing the amount of traffic grow and grow and grow on our roads. So really the question here for us today is how many more people do we want to see seriously injured, traumatized, and worse before we actually build that safer network. We need to keep on track with the investment proposed. I find it farcical that the way that we can improve the outcomes and the design is by cutting the design and engagement budget in half. We're going to have that much less opportunity for community input, that much less ability to get it right. And then when we're going to cut the actual capital side of it in half, well, what we'll end up with is space that isn't really protected, because last time I checked, paint does nothing to stop a vehicle actually going places. We do actually need to be investing in separated spaces that do make it safe and useful to the large number of people that would very much like to take up biking but currently see it as far too risky in this city. So please, colleagues, do the right thing and vote this down so that we actually have the ability to continue to progress towards a transport network in this city that works for everyone, not just the majority.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Just firstly, I'm intrigued at the comments that have just been made about the percentage of our community who have communicated to us about cycling. I don't know about you, but I'm not just taking the written and oral submissions into account here. I can't go anywhere without people in my community telling me what they think about what we've done recently in the cycling space. At my work in the hospital, I've got people constantly telling me that. When I go out socially, I've got people constantly talking to me about that. And those are people who wouldn't usually raise things to do with this role with me. Yes, I'm interested in safer cycling, but we need to listen to our community. We need to rethink, have we got the model quite right? I don't think we have. I think we need to move at a slower pace, and we need to bring our community with us. So yes, absolutely, I'll be supporting this.
Councillors, I too will support this, and it's around the balanced and prioritisation view, and I think you'll see all sectors are coming up for a little bit of a trim, and including those that you've all got sectors that you really do support. So I think Councillor Johnson's comments earlier on that everyone is in this, it needs to face this. I do think the social licence or community support for cycling has taken a beating, I'll be really honest. But it's not cycling that's at fault, it's the model we're using and how we're delivering it. Look, we've got to have another look at how we're doing these things. And I think you'd have to be living under a rock to not get Featherston Street chucked at you somewhere. I even got it last night at the opening of the Jazz Festival, in a funny way. But so I question the model, how we're delivering it, and I do think we need to bring people with us, and that includes having a slowdown. I agree with Councillor Barrett, there does need to be a space and a safe space for cyclists. You know, when I grew up, everyone cycled, but there's more vehicles on the roads now. So there does need to be a different look on how we're doing things. But we're not even doing paint. Seriously? The paint is not even going down. So we're not even doing that very, very, very basic means of showing where a cycle lane is. That, yes, it's not protected, but we're not even doing that. So look, I'm going to support this because we've heard that we do need to be pragmatic about what we're doing. We're not stopping it. It's still in there and it's still got a significant budget. But we do need to get the community support back for cycling. Otherwise, there'll be this against it and this for it. We need to be balanced. So that's what I'd like to see. And we go around and we can open cycle networks and pathways with real confidence and with real community support. So I will be supporting this. Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. No surprises, I won't support this cut. And I think the problem that we have is in our community, across our entire community, we actually have a fundamental misunderstanding of what roadways are. They're actually a shared space. And at the moment, they are not a shared space. And I'll actually give you an example just from yesterday. I ride a bike to work. And yesterday I was riding up Fitzherbert Ave, and and there's a cycleway all the way up coming into town, and then the cycleway stops as you cross Ferguson Street. I'm riding between Ferguson Street and the square. I'm riding on the white line, which demarcates the area between the parking and the lane, and a white van decides that he has right of way and actually pushes over and nearly collides with me. I think it was deliberate. And that's the risk that cyclists face every day. Quite rightly, there's been a lot of noise about Featherston Street. We had the same noise with College Street. We had the same noise with Main Street when they were under construction. What do we hear now about College Street and Main Street? Nothing. Not a thing, not a peep. We are not brave in this chamber. Creating cycleways is an imperative because it is a shared space. And if we don't push on with that work, there are going to be other fatalities. And I will be right. And those that vote in support of that will be wrong. This is a critical decision that needs to be taken without consideration of all the noise that comes from the echo chamber, where people only hear the sound of their own voices and their own opinions. And they don't take or value the viewpoints of other people. There will be injuries and there will be deaths if we don't continue this work. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If there's one thing we don't have social licence for as a result of this LTP, it would be more cycleways at the level that we've been proposing. That has been well and clear. Just as the Mayor said, I've had people, countless people, not political, people at work who've said to me, oh, what do you think of the Featherston Street thing, William? Not because they know that I supported it or didn't support it, just because they can't believe what they're seeing. I wanted to make a point here. I question whether or not our NZTA investment that we're predicting for this program will continue to come through. We've seen a clear shift in priorities from this government, and so I think having a smaller budget provision is sensible because we don't know what the future holds in terms of funding of this space. In terms of the $480 million for roads that Councillor Barrett highlighted, there was an interesting submission which said, absolutely, let's fund cycleways to the amount that they're using our roads. 2.9% of our community cycle, and so 2.9% of that 480 million would be 13.9 million. So this is still leaving in 15.28 million in the budget for it. The comment was made that all the savings in the transport space are going to be in cycling. If you have a look at the next, 4, 5, 6 recommendations, there's plenty of other savings proposed in the transport space because Councillor Johnson quite rightly outlined to get this budget balanced, every area is going to have to make sacrifices, not just one. So I don't view this as targeting cycling over any other program. We've just done Streets for People. We're next doing the low-cost, low-risk Road to Zero budget. I believe that's next on the list. So there are plenty of areas which are taking a hit, not just cycling. The comment that 88% of submitters were silent on it is bizarre to me, given the consultation document didn't ask for questions on Featherston Street. I would say the fact that 12% of submissions actually took the time to write this project specifically in, even though it wasn't one we're consulting on, because it's already happening, is proof that our community care deeply about this issue. And if you need more proof of that, there's a petition currently running which has 3,744 signatures to reverse the changes, and a counter petition which has 302 signatures that support it. So I would say that's pretty clear finger on the pulse of where our community is sitting. In terms of, I agree with Councillor that if we continue to do exactly the same work we're planning on with half the budget, that wouldn't work. The suggestion here is that we do half the work. So we'll do a smaller section of the road and do it well, rather than doing a large section of road and doing it at a larger scale. So the idea here isn't that we just continue to do everything as planned. We'll do less with less. That's the whole idea of a slowdown. I really have to push back against this noise from the echo chamber idea. You mean our community? You mean the people that we're here to represent? When I've seen teachers of mine who are certainly not politically aligned with me sharing the petition to reverse the change at Featherston because they use that road every day, because they work with the students who use that road, and because they don't believe in it. And that's just one particular example, but that is what this program continues to support. And so I think to disregard the view of the vast, or what would certainly appear to be the vast majority of our community, and just say, oh, they're just an echo chamber, they don't know what they're talking about, I just can't agree with that. I'm sorry, I think it's just not true. In terms of accidents, I almost got into an accident yesterday driving home from the LTP, going down Featherston Street, because someone chose to make a right-hand turn onto Elizabeth Street and stopped very suddenly. And so the car in front of me, obviously hadn't been expecting the car in front of them to stop to make a right-hand turn in the middle of the road, had to stop abruptly. And so luckily I was paying close attention. I was managed to get into the blimmin' air brakes and not crash into the back of them. But I think the suggestion that accidents are only going to not happen if we do cycleways just doesn't add up. There will be accidents if we do it, there'll be accidents if we don't do it. It depends very much on the design of what we do, not whether we do or don't do something. So I think, there's more to it than just saying, oh, well, if you vote for this, you're wanting to cause accidents. I think I could equally say if you vote against this, you're wanting to cause accidents because the new designs are going to cause car crashes. So I think there's some balance to be struck in that argument. But this still leaves $15.28 million in the budget to continue and progress some of this work. But this is where we're finding a way to release some of the cost pressure on our community on a project that I don't believe we continue to have social licence on. So I hope my colleagues will support this.
Councillor Zabellan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just want to start by quoting one of the submitters, who I think is in the room actually, that we don't need to make roads safer for cyclists or public transport. Most people drive cars. But there are those in our community who can't drive, who are not permitted to drive. There are teens, there are seniors, there are people in our disabled community who do not have access to private transport. There are families and people out there who are being forced out of cars, not by us, but by economic conditions, the price of fuel. We've seen it in our economic updates. The car sales are down considerably. Discretionary spending is down. People are starting to need choices that are viable to be able to move around. But there are those who don't have that option to use a car, and we must retain some budget so that we can accommodate those people who are excluded from private transport. I think unprotected cycleways are often disregarded by drivers. They park in the cycleways. And we saw a PowerPoint presentation with photographs of children commuting by bicycle, manoeuvring around those cars who parked in the cycleway and the unsafe conditions that they were navigating that journey in. So I think there's quite a lot of evidence that what we have now is not safe, and it does put people at risk. And I have also had many people talk to me, probably not as many as are against, but I have had many people talk to me in favour of Featherston Street, and they have told me that they're afraid to say this online for fear of being dumped on quite viciously. I've also advocated quite strongly for some of the businesses, and they got the outcomes that they wanted with this cycleway and now are suspiciously silent on any of the other changes that we're making. So there's sort of a deafening silence from people who've won in this or who approve this, and it leaves an imbalance of perception. I would be very disappointed if we were cutting the engagement that we were doing on cycleways. I went to every single one of our co-design sessions. I went to as many of the pop-ups as I could, and I've been as engaged as I could possibly be in terms of what people were thinking. And my reflection at the end of it was that when we first started this, we went out on Facebook and said, we're making safety improvements to Featherston Street. We didn't say, we're building a cycleway on Featherston Street. And I think that if we had done that differently, things might have panned out differently. I think there's a sense that we were disingenuous about what we were trying to do with that. So where I get to with cycleways is that the buy-in is essential, and the co-design that we followed, although it had a massive amount of people, more than we've ever had contributing to that, has still failed to bring the community along with us. So the engagement, I think, is what is most important. And ultimately, where I land on this is in agreement with Councillor Johnson that everything must take a hit this retains some budget to help accommodate those people who are not permitted to use private transport, and strongly urge us to make sure that we focus on the engagement and the design of these cycleways in a strong way, and be really clear with our messaging about what we're trying to do. Thanks.
Deputy Mayor.
Tēnā koe, Your Worship, o te rā, tēnā tātou. Councillor Zabellan pretty much said everything I wanted to say. There were everything that she said I supported. Also, there were things that Councillor Henkel, Councillor Johnson and Councillor Barrett said that resonated with me very strongly. I suppose listening to all the discussions that we've had over the weeks and months about the cycling network and improvements, it's been very interesting because we've had such a mix. And yes, you know, I'm in a community day in, day out working where I hear a lot of comments. However, I also know I see a lot of people, the young ones that I see, who are either riding their bikes in really dangerous places and or want to ride their bikes. I suppose, you know, first and foremost, safety is paramount for us. I understand and get it. We all know that everything's got to go down in this financially constrained times. But I want to go on record in saying that I really support the fact that Palmerston North has been striving to create a safer environment, and we put those most vulnerable at the top. The cyclists, the pedestrians, we had public transport, and then we had the motorists and the parking at the bottom of that hierarchy. And I really think that that's the right way to do, because we should be looking after the most vulnerable. Talking about, and I am really grateful to the people who have given submissions and have come along. Ngā mihi kia koutou. But I know that the community that I grew up in, and I see and work with, many of them don't say things. Why? Because they haven't had those experiences of standing up, speaking up, or even being listened to. So when you're not listened to at first, you certainly don't put your head up and do anything. You know, it's hard. It's hard for people sometimes to say, I actually don't like that, because you're too scared of the wave that might come. And Councillor Zabellan said that there are some people who are scared to say what they truly think. So I do want us to think, oh, okay, 3,000, 5,000 people want it this way. We're in a city of almost 100,000, okay, 92,000. So that sort of, I'm just saying that those who do make submissions, that's fantastic, but there's a whole group of people we don't capture for whatever reason, and I know many of them don't, because they feel they're not going to be heard, or they don't have that confidence or that education to do that, you know, to walk through these doors. I too, like Councillor Zabellan, went to those meetings, and it was good to hear things. I'm supporting those who are vulnerable, the most vulnerable. I love seeing the cyclists around our city. Te papai o ia, the clearing, the flat area, the place where people can get around more readily. We're probably more accessible via cycleways and paving than any other places. You go down places that got hills and goodness knows what. So I'm standing up and saying, I clearly know that we've got to reduce things. I'm saddened that it's going to be reduced by so much, but I also want to say that I'm not going to deviate from the fact that we need to keep cyclists, pedestrians safe, and have them in the forefront of our mind as well. Kia ora koutou.
Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This process I've kept pretty quiet because people have said what I believe, and I don't think we have to repeat things, but this time it's a little bit different. Over the years, we've had the well-organised cycle network or lobby group, whatever you want to call them, come into council, putting their point across. We've had debacles like Main Street, which none of us probably will ever forget, and the extra accidents that happened and was caused by that. My own son was hit by a car on a cycle, and he's never been on a cycle since, so it's affected my family as well. But the bottom line is we're living in hard times, not just in Palmerston North, but we're living in hard times here in New Zealand. And everybody has got to be willing to bite the bullet. Not just everybody else but my pet project, but everybody has got to be willing to bite the bullet. And councillors, when your pet project comes up, you have to be willing to say, okay, let's reduce it or let's cut it for now. And I think we have to accept this. We have to cut what we're spending on cycling until this country, until this city has better income to be able to pay for it. Because our source of income is called the ratepayers. And they have very, very clearly said to us, cut it back, cuz. Because if we don't, some of us might not be sitting around this table at the next election. We've got to listen to our ratepayers, and they are hurting. Some of them are cutting back on their food to pay for rates. We can cut back on a few cycle lanes for a couple of years to help them have a bit more food on the table.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I find this one really incredibly difficult. Councillor Findlay say, you know, I also had a child knocked off bike, and I know I'm not alone in that around this table. Many of you will know I was also knocked off my bike coming in to council, probably in much the same way as Councillor Hancock described this morning. But I can accept that we do need to find cuts. I think my question, well, first, there was a point made that the government probably doesn't support this and therefore this is fine to cut. I will reflect the conversation that was had earlier where the Chief Financial Officer said that our finance strategy assumes that failure to attract funding would require coming back to the Chamber for a decision because that would impact on our debt limit. So I assume that applies here, that if we don't attract funding from NZTA, that would come back to the Chamber for us to make a decision. I'd almost rather that wasn't the case. That terrifies me in the light of this conversation, that we might halve a budget here and then decide that we're not going to keep this budget because half of the funding has disappeared and we end up with a quarter of the budget. And that is next to nothing in the scale of the project that's ahead of us. So I find this incredibly difficult and fraught with risk at every level. Many of you will know that over the years I've been involved mostly with our secondary schools and sometimes with our primaries in their active transport planning. And I stand because I am going to support this reduction, but I really would like to see us work to focus the reduced investment on the transport of our most vulnerable. And in that, I mean our school children. If we're serious about getting our kids active and getting them onto bikes, then a network that isn't actually a network doesn't help that. A focus on destinations and connected up cycle corridors would really help with that conversation. And I suppose my appeal here is for some targeted work about how we get best value out of a limited and reduced financial commitment here. And to hope that then shows results in the numbers of cyclists using our network, and that would give us confidence to step in if the government fails to meet community needs in this space. Thank you.
Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just thought that I'll probably just add my voice to the debate and actually stress some stuff. Or reiterate some, not reiterate, but agree and sometimes, and also push back on some of the comments that have been made. First of all, I'm going to start by saying that I'm going to support this. Not because I don't think cycle lanes are important in our city. And a lot of people that have heard me actually speak here in this chamber will know that I've supported cycle lanes and a more integrated network to make our road safer, and also a network, a roading network or transport network to meet the needs of all road users. I think the principle behind this or underpinning my decision is around safety, but I also understand that we also need to make cuts in order to lighten or alleviate the burden on our ratepayers. But one thing that I'm going to push back today, I think, is this notion that because we do not have a huge percentage of people cycling in Palmerston North, that we shouldn't cater to the needs of the people of Palmerston North. I think the fact that we just want to listen to the voices that align to our thinking or our philosophy, or just listen to a group of people that is a very loud, either a loud minority or a loud majority, and people actually threaten us and say, you know, if you vote this way, I'm not going to vote for you next time. I think we need to be more principled and be bold, like Councillor Hancock said here, that in this chamber, we need to be bold in our decision making. And being bold doesn't mean that we don't listen to the community or we don't listen to some of the people, but we need to actually make decisions that are not just popular, but decisions that are beneficial to the whole community. And coming here with a perspective of the principle of safety around my decision, I just can't ignore some of those people, the cyclists, for example. And in voting for this, it's just about trying to find cuts and making sure that we're responding to some of the community needs. But I just wanted to push back on the idea that, you know, just because we have a small group of cyclists in our community, that means that we shouldn't take care of their needs and also take them into consideration, that sort of thing. So in light of this, we all want to make, you know, I just want to advise or encourage colleagues today that we all want to make cuts in certain ways or wherever we want to find cuts. Us voting in one way or the other doesn't mean that we don't want to find cuts or in certain ways, or, you know, not trying to reduce the budget. But we also have to have look at the bigger picture, which is the transport network or the vision that we had to make sure that we all the modes of transportation are actually captured, and we make it easier for all our road users. So I just want to encourage our colleagues here also to be mindful of the comments that we're making, because one person voting either way doesn't necessarily mean that they don't want to see cuts, but it's also just trying to also see the bigger picture and also trying to do what's best for the community in a certain way. So I think the labeling that's been going on around the table, I think it's been a bit uncomfortable, but I just wanted to put it out there. But in all being said, I'll be supporting this just because we want to also respond to some of the community needs that we've experienced, some of the community submissions that we've heard from people, and also make sure that we alleviate some of the burden upon our ratepayers. Thank you.
Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're all talking, so I thought I might as well as well. We've got a long day ahead of us. Now, we've all got stories of community that's voiced their opinions to us. And, you know, lots of them probably aren't that good. You know, there's a lot of people in the community worried about going forward. And, you know, echo Councillor Finlay's comments. You know, there's a lot of elderly in the community worried about rates and going forward. People that have retired some years ago and, you know, they've only got XYZ in the kitty. Now, I went to the Awapuni Library LTP session and was the only councillor there and was quite mobbed, which was fine. And, you know, I heard a lot of conflicting views, and as I was leaving, an elderly lady came up to me on the street and was talking to me about rates and how worried she was going forward, and and how she only had XYZ in the bank, and her husband had passed away a lot of years before, and how she every couple of weeks used to buy a bunch of flowers because it used to bring joy to her, and how she stopped doing that. Now she doesn't buy Women's Weekly, and all these sorts of things. So, you know, this is affecting people massively. Certainly happy to support this, and certainly happy to support any savings at all with rates. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
All right, a right to reply to you, Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Happy to do this. This proposed, let's think about the bigger picture and do what's right. I think we try and do that on every line item. Was one of the about drawing this here. Some of the reflections when we said, oh, we don't hear a peep out of the College Street or the Pioneer Highway issues in the past with the roading. I just want to deal with this too. We had a packed, Palmerston North Intermediate School was packed with a public meeting when we started that stretch of road, and we had to reinvest in hundreds of thousands of dollars to do some insert parking as a consequence. That was the reflected of that. It's fair we don't get a peep out of Pioneer Highway because we listened and we didn't progress those planter box idea. That was the hottest issue of the year that year, I would have suggested. And this one here with Featherston Street. And this is not forsaking that we're going to have to spend more money on the central strip that got sandblasted with the old lines and broke up the surface, and maybe, you know, the live bus stops in the middle of the road and stuff. There's more money to be considered potentially in that work. And this is notwithstanding that we did the intersection, and then Waka Kotahi come out with almost another $500,000 to do other safety treatments on the side streets and stuff to kind of, I don't know, it seemed like another appeasement to try and make it even more safer. And it just seems absurd to me that to say that we've got this right. And to say that we're voting alongside our own personal view, I just want to push back on that and say that if you're going to support this, you're voting wrong. So if that is true, as been suggested, I would want you to encourage you to vote wrong on this recommendation on your own personal view. No, that's not true. That is not true. I feel like this is the silent majority of our city is noisy on this issue. The silent majority on this in our city has got noisy on this issue because they have got big question marks around the investment. And it would be okay if somebody said to us, look, what success would look like is about 25,000 cyclists going up and down through that intersection a month. And we could measure that and go, okay, I could see the progress. But how many do you see biking down College Street? How many do you see biking down Pioneer Highway? And I'm holding my breath to see how many is going to go through the intersection at Featherston Street. And so, you know, this goes around the investment needs to be aligned with the benefit and the take-up of cycling, and also in mind with bringing the community along with us. I think we've got to stop back, go back and get them, because we don't have the social license that's been referred to on this issue at the minute. And so for all those reasons, addressing them off, I hope you can support this recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, councillors, we will vote on G6, please. And that is passed. 10 votes for and 2 against. Okay, councillors, we're going to have a break, but just before we go there, just about everybody spoke and they just about used up all their time as well. I'm going to suggest that we're going to go, we've got 46 other recommendations to go through. We've got through 3 this morning. Okay, I realise that some of them are quite meaty and big, but if we continue at this rate, we'll be here for 2 weeks. So we're going to have to look at 3 for, 3 against. I'm getting a lot of nods, so I'm going to, as the chair, I'm going to enforce that. I will spread it out so that there's not just one person speaking the entire time. Okay, enjoy your break and a cup of coffee. To those in the gallery, there's a cuppa for you in the foyer as well. We'll be back into the chamber at 20 past. are going to go with, in terms of speaking rights, 3 for, 3 against. Can I just ask you, unless you absolutely have to, not to use your full 5 minutes? The last one, just everybody use full 5 minutes. So, as I said, we will be here for 2 weeks if we continue at that rate. So, councillors, the next one is G7. This is around council reducing program 2390, citywide transport, low cost, low risk and road to zero to 4 million in year 1 and adjusted for inflation thereafter. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll be brief. We're increasing our roading renewals budget from 5.4 million a year to 9.1 million a year. So we're already increasing our spend in the roading space, and particularly in the renewal space, which enables us, when we rebuild roads, to look at safety treatments we can do there. This is our largest roading budget in the strategic section that officers themselves identified as a strategic budget, not a critical or legal obligation. Road to Zero is gone, and in turn, some of the plans and projects that we were planning to do there have also gone. And so I appreciate that, much like a gas, projects will fill. There's always more we can spend money on, and so this is a sensible way that we can find a way to deliver a reduction to our largest strategic transport budget without, which also takes into account the significant increase in roading renewal budgets. So I hope you'll support this.
Okay, Councillor Johnson.
Just a couple of questions to officers, please. First of all, if we can just have a description of the impact of reducing this budget, which I think would be halving the budget over the 10-year plan timescale.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the impact would be we would have a much slower program of improvements and works on our network. We'd still address the urgent issues, but the rest of the issues will be implemented slower.
And is this subject to an NZTA subsidy?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ballin.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a question as well as to the nature of these projects. I understand they're capped at being 2 million or less. Are these the types of projects that are road safety treatments or raised crossings, things like that? What sort of projects are we talking about?
Queen.
They are a wide range of projects, including the projects you described. The intersection improvements where traffic can flow. Some of those might be signalisations, the raised platforms. In some of our more rural type areas, they can be intersection improvements for flow, safety, visibility, those type of jobs. And yes, you are correct, they're 2 million or below.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. I'm really happy to second this. Part of my thinking on this one is that we've stepped up the renewals from about 28 million to 32.5 million going into year 1. That's a 4.5 million increase, which is quite significant. That's 16% increase in our renewals. Most of that is in roading. So in our roading budgets, we're stepping up our renewals from 5.4 to 9.1 million, which is a 68% increase in roading renewals. The feedback from the community very strongly that I heard said, look after what you've got well, and please fix our roads. We don't want the potholes. The officer advice to Councillor Johnson's written question about how do we reduce rates, officers urged us to retain the renewal budgets, but to think about the capital new. This is a capital new budget, so this is not renewing and looking after our roads, this is doing new stuff to our roads. So I think this is the area that we need to look. We would actually still be spending the same amount on our roads by making this 4 million reduction, but it's, from my view, it's a transfer from what we were spending in the way of new stuff onto what is probably more prudent and appropriate to be looking after our roads to the renewal space. And I think that does reflect a more sensible approach to looking after our assets and does reflect feedback from our community.
Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I've just got a question. Just in terms of some of our high-risk intersections, is this reduction going to put at risk some of the changes that we might need to actually implement?
Certainly our program of works will slow down, but we will continue to target the high-risk areas first.
Councillor Barrett.
Comment? Thanks. again, really struggle with this notion of going after a few areas really deeply and leaving a whole lot of areas untouched across the transport space, so that, this would be a 10% cut in the overall budget, but coming at a 50% within one space. And I really struggle with taking that approach, especially when we see the amount of pressure that the transport network's under. I think if we've gotten one message loud and clear over the last 3 years through this chamber, it is that the transport network is under huge pressure, in some places well and truly falling apart. But this budget in particular isn't so much about the falling apart, but it is making sure that as we see more and more vehicle traffic, more and more heavy vehicle traffic, that we do have an ability to actually respond and keep the network functioning to a high level overall. And so would be very reluctant and would urge colleagues to be very cautious about this level of cut in this budget. If we were to look at something like maybe a 10% trim, which would be 800,000, that would be appropriate and would be in line with where we might get to across the wider budgets. But to go after half of something that is actually quite essential for the sorts of responses that we quite often hear into this chamber around specific areas in the community where there's concern around crossings, concern around school areas, need for specific intersections to be improved. This is the sort of thing where we go to respond to those, and to cut our response by half would not be appropriate given the incredible backlog of work that actually needs doing to bring our transport system up to spec overall. So I'd urge colleagues to vote this down unless there's an amendment that would substantially reduce the cut.
All right. Beck, you don't need it? Okay, we're going to vote on this, please. And that has passed 12 votes for and 4 against. All right, we come to G8, and that amend Program 1194 CET Arena Master Plan redevelopment to retain the Barber and Bell Halls with appropriate maintenance, but at the same time developing and constructing a new Arena 5 indoor facility spread over years 1 to 3, with outer fields redevelopment and other master plan projects to be revisited in year 4. I've moved that, seconded by Councillor Hapeta. Look, if I could just speak to this again, those that know me know that I'm passionate about Arena, but it needs to come up into the project and look at reprioritising what we can do. This facility is critical for the city's economic development as well, not only the sporting and social and cultural aspects of our community, but there was a question, I think, from one of the councillors about what was the economic development of, economic impact of Arena, and it's huge. In fact, it's probably worthwhile at some stage our economists doing some work in that space. We know alone that just the motorsport or stock cars part is worth nearly 30 odd million, but I'd suspect that the other side of it is sports tournaments and that, which the majority are indoors, not all, but majority are indoors. New Zealand volleyball, New Zealand basketball, New Zealand badminton, New Zealand table tennis, and the consistent submissions and advocacy there is around more space, and also for our own community as well. So this keeps the indoor new indoor facility alive, and I would be suggesting to officers that we look at a design and build aspect of that, but also other master plan projects can be revisited in year 4, similar to what we're doing with the pathways. In terms of the Barber and Bell halls, we got a lot of submissions around, don't forget us in the design process. And it's unfortunate that it was carried out from an urban design. The draft master plan was carried out with an urban design, heavy urban design focus, and not everybody was consulted. So it's clear that the Barber and Bell halls are still very valuable to some groups, and I acknowledge arena management here that they do maintain these well, and there is still life left in them, and we won't demolish them for some more car parks, but we will keep them at the same time as a new Arena 5. So I hope you can support this. It's certainly pulling back from what was revisited. It's worth around 17 million in those years, 1 to 3, and it still keeps an outer look to the master plan year 4 onwards. Councillor Hapeta.
I know we're in the frame of cutting things, but I'm fully in support of this because the submissions that we did actually receive were in full support of Arena. Many submitters actually supported Arena, and a lot of our community do use Arena for many different reasons, whether it's for sporting reasons or community reasons, they do use Arena. So I'm fully in support of this. Arena 5 really needs to get going, and we do need to get going on what we are doing with Arena 5. So I'm fully in support of this, and also to look at the master plan in year 4. I think that's a very good idea. So fully in support of this, and I hope you do support it. Thank you.
Councillor Barn.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thanks for your comments, particularly around Barber and Bell halls. I think that came across really strongly in submissions, that those facilities are well loved, well utilised, and meet some very niche needs for sporting codes in our city, which it came through in the submissions that there wasn't a level of confidence yet that those needs would be reflected into a proposed new development when we demolished Barber and Bell halls. So I'm certainly in favour of us retaining Barber and Bell Hall, noting particularly that there were seismic issues with, I think, Barber, which have been alleviated slightly by the time frames for seismic strengthening being pushed out. But and noting that the last part of this recommendation asks us to revisit the master plan in year 4. And in light of that, I'm going to test the room and move an amendment that we delete the development and construction of Arena 5 in years 1 to 3 and include that in the revisit to year 4 and seek a seconder for that. It's not something I particularly like to do, but there was strong feedback in the submissions that we should focus on the things we've got before we build new things. The arena is functioning really well at the moment. It brings significant economic impact into our city. I accept that there is a risk in not pushing ahead with Arena 5 that we start to lose some events. That is a real risk, and I'm not pretending otherwise. But at the moment it works well. I think we can maintain. We might have to give up some growth, but on the face of things, we can't afford that growth. So I'll ask first to take that as an amendment and see how it sits. Thanks.
Is there a seconder for that?
Yes.
Okay, Councillor Naylor. All right, I'll open it up again for those that want to speak to the amendment. Could you just put your hand up if you want to speak to the amendment? Okay, I'll go to you, Councillor Johnson.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, just in the way you're doing the system with 3 for and 3 against, I wonder if we could just have a call at the start for questions. Otherwise, those of us with a question might have to vote before we have the question answered. But anyway, just my question to you was for your original proposal, did that have any budget implication? Does it change any of the budget lines in that programme?
Yes, it does. It pushes it pushes out the fields. So I think there was 36 million, and 17 million is retained, and the remainder of that 36 million goes out past year 4. In fact, it's revisited in year 4.
But it's still sitting in the 10-year plan?
It is, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so it's a sort of a deferral, would it
It's a
be fair?
deferral.
Yeah, fair to say. Okay, thank you. And just in terms of a question on the amendment, what's the budget implication of the amendment? Is that deferral as well, but a longer deferral of that budget for Arena 5?
It would come back into the year 4 conversation.
All right, thank you. I don't need to make a comment, I just want to know what I'm voting on.
All right. Councillor Naylor, you want to speak to the amendment?
Thank you. Very happy to second that amendment. I think that the key thing with the arena is any investment we make, unlike the previous items that we discussed this morning, which had co-funding from NZTA, all the investment into Arena 5 is ratepayer funded, 100%. Yes, it's a great facility. The feedback actually was very mixed. If we look in our papers, we'll see it was quite mixed on that. And there was a lot of submissions that acknowledged the amount of investment that Arena has had in recent years, particularly the 17 million in that overbridge area. I'm really comfortable in hearing our community's feedback to pause on investment in CET Arena just for the next 3 years and then revisit that in year 4. The community currently subsidises the arena by 75%. The fees that come in, the income, the revenue for the arena covers 25% of that cost. Over the course of the 10-year period, that shrinks down to 18% by year 10, whereby the community is being asked to subsidise 82% for that. And yes, there's some economic benefit to the things that happen at arena, but that economic benefit goes to some of our community, not all of our community who are paying for that cost. And those people in our community who are paying for that cost, many of those people have said, we cannot afford this. So I think this is definitely something that we can pause on, that we can wait. So I fully support this amendment. I do think that it just needs to be deleted, spread over years 1 to 3, because that's a part of what relates to the new Arena 5.
Okay. It surprised me to have the sport chair putting this up, but I will speak against it. Look, we've got to speak some facts here. There was a strong majority of support in the submissions I read for Arena. There is... Yes?
Point of order is inaccurately representing the information from the officers that's in the report on page 118.
The submissions I read, there was strong support.
Okay, the report says that there was 420 submissions and 420 either opposed or wanted a scope reduction.
Okay. We've all got different views, Councillor. So there's a risk here, absolute real risk. And if people go to these facilities, they'll see how well used they are. And no stadium in New Zealand, in fact, I think Arena would arguably be the most versatile and least publicly funded stadium of its size and capacity in New Zealand. The amount of money being spent on it is minimal, absolutely minimal. Get a passport and go to any other city in the world and see the stadiums round here. Christchurch, what are Christchurch spending? 480 million. And they spend tens of millions on operational. So we are cutting off our nose to spite our face here. Everybody's taking a hit here, and that's why I put this up originally, to not protect something, but to say we are still doing stuff, but we're going to defer some stuff back into later years. This facility does produce economic benefit and social and community benefit for us. I think it would be very sad for our community that we just become so unjoined up and so hard on ourselves that we are just not going to do anything at Arena. So you risk losing stuff, I can tell you now. Again, for somebody that does get out and go to these facilities and other cities, they are fighting for some of this stuff. So basketball, volleyball, badminton, gym sports, the list goes on. You risk it all. So please don't support the amendment. The substantive gives us a deferral, but it also keeps the economic and the social community beating heart of Arena still alive. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Happy to follow on after you because the theme is the same, is that the value of the investment at Arena actually can be realised as tangible. The biggest events the city hosts, in the top 5, I think there's at least 4 at the Arena, and they're significant. And so why we subsidise every stadium in the country, in fact, I'd wonder in the globe, is subsidised. So don't lose the fact of the subsidy. But the indirect economic benefit that it offers our city is enormous. And so we don't have lakes, we don't have mountains, people come here for events. And those national age groups, national sports tournaments are a real driving strategy that we have. And to protect what we have, we can't rest on our laurels. It's already pressing in demand. They had the volleyball nationals there. The amount of entries has been a record entries this year. They had to cap it because there's just no more space in the stadiums. And so having a plan for Arena 5, I think, is an important part of the master plan. I think it's an important part, take it a step back, of our economic strategies for the city. And I think deferring that out to after year 4 is just not worth considering. So this is the little bit of the one recommendation trying to capture all. So this recommendation is trying to capture the Barber Hall and the Bow Halls to have some maintenance. It's trying to have the Arena 5 staged, and then we're trying to say the outer fields. And my preference, I'll speak on a number of other points just on this once, is to rather have them all separated and debate them all as, rather than having a total capture. But for this amendment here, I'm clearly against it, and I'd plead with you to actually kind of have an open mind and understand that the arena is critical for our strategies for economic development. Thank you.
Councillor McLeod.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. And just like you, I'm quite surprised to see the Chair of Sports actually proposing this. It doesn't surprise me that I'll be voting against this. First of all, I just want to highlight that I'm prepared not to lose some of the events that we're currently we're hosting. I think the underlying theme, I think, guiding my decision today is around economic development, city vibrancy, and also, sports, sports and also indoor events that we host at the arena, including the Manawatu Home and Lifestyle Show, and many other national sporting events that we host in the arena. There are risks to this recommendation or this amendment, sorry, and personally, I'm not prepared to lose those events. And second of all, I'm not prepared to just support cuts for the sake of supporting cuts. So I'm not prepared to support cuts at the expense of economic development. Arena alone brings about 3,000 events yearly, bringing in more than $100 million in economic to our local economy. That's a huge boost to our local economy. And talking about the economic impact that it brings to our city, all those events as well helps us in branding our city as a destination for those sporting events. And for those causes, I'm not going to take much time, but for those causes, I will not support this. And I'll be voting in support of the original motion and encourage my colleagues to vote against this. Let's not just cut or reduce budget at the expense of other benefits that the community actually sees, the benefits that the community actually generates from. I'm someone who goes out quite a lot, and as well as the mover, attending a lot of events at the arena, basketball, volleyball, and all sort of events. And that's so I'm quite surprised that this is coming at the expense of some of those economic benefits that the city, not just economic benefits, but also the cultural and social benefits that it brings to our city. Me just going to the Manawatu Jets basketball game and seeing families enjoying on a Sunday or Saturday, on a Sunday night or Saturday evening, enjoying the game and that sort of thing, and seeing them enjoy some of those activities is a joy to me personally, not only because of the economic benefits that Arena brings, but also seeing the social benefits that it brings to our community. So personally, I'll be voting against this and vote in favour of the substantive. Thank you.
So is there anybody else who wants to speak in favour of this? Councillor Isabella.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, I'm happy to support this motion despite having put up an alternative. I would congratulate the Chair of Sports for showing some leadership. I think $36 million or even $17 million is an astronomical sum when we've seen no concept designs, only high-level cost breakdown and no visibility over the project's progress to date, except for the concerns that have come up through submissions that community groups and users have not been satisfactorily involved and that they're not convinced that our current plan trajectory will be fit for purpose for them. So the same level of rigour that we've applied to our community facility proposals is actually missing here. And so this can't be an evidence-based decision, it's a strategic decision. And I do support investment in our facilities, particularly Arena 5. We've heard lots about the widespread and significant use that it will attract. It's had reasonable support in the submissions, even from those who didn't support investment in other facilities. So I'll take that on board, but I want us to take more time to ensure that we are properly consulting with the user groups to ensure that what we do build is actually going to meet the needs. We've said many times this morning that we need to be practical and we need to look at how we can spend less, particularly on new facilities. And we have a significant budget for renewals and operational spending at Arena for the existing facilities already, in excess of $5 million. When we're talking about economic benefit, that is coming from the existing buildings at the moment. What we're talking about is a new facility which doesn't yet exist. So as regards risk, our risk tolerance is medium. If we want to change that, we need to change the risk settings that we've set previously. The economic benefit that's talked of at length is already happening as is. We're talking about new facilities, an increased benefit, an increased level of service, but the message from the community is clear that we can afford to take a pause. We can't afford to just press on. And we don't have hardly any visibility about what it is we'll actually be doing except some very high level concept designs. So I'm very much in favour of taking a pause, revisiting this, when we have more information and we can be sure that the user groups and the stakeholders are being properly consulted and that what we're going to produce is going to increase the economic benefit that we are actually seeking. So I'm definitely in support of this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, and as many of you said, this is surprising coming from the Chair of Culture and Sport, and so I want you to ask yourselves why. Why would I move it? I use the arena a lot. It's a facility I'm really very familiar with. Not just for its many sporting events, but also as reference for its cultural and social events. I hugely value this facility in our community. But all of the things you talked about, the benefits that we get, are from the existing arena. And yes, I accept that there is risk that over time that comes under pressure. This is a 3-year pause. And as we've talked about in all of the other situations, there's every opportunity for officers to bring it back into the chamber if something comes up that we need to consider. So I don't do this lightly and I don't do it easily, but we've already cut programmes that are as dear to me as the arena is, and there will be more that come. And I think we have to be prepared to look at everything. And sport and economic development are not exempt from that. And so I've put this up to test the room, and you'll vote as you feel is appropriate. But my why is clear. There are no sacred cows.
Okay, we'll vote. And that has failed for want of majority, 8-all.
Found the sacred cows.
Yes, they're moving.
All right, we will go back to the substantive. We've had 2 speak for it, and we've had 1 speak against it. So is there anybody else wishing to? Actually, we've still got a gap there. So, Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. I just want to be clear that this recommendation is an increase to funding in years 1 to 3. Currently for CET Arena, we have 12.1 million. This recommendation is asking 17 million to be put in years 1 to 3 for the arena. So I will not be supporting this, but do want to indicate that Councillor Zabellin and myself have an alternate if this recommendation fails, which does pose perhaps what you might see as a middle ground, which is that CET, it's in your papers in front of you, the CET Arena Master Plan redevelopment would provide for construction of Arena 5 in years 3 to 5 and Outer Fields development in years 7 to 9. Given that the amendment just failed through a lack of majority, I would urge you to vote against the substantive and consider the alternate as a better way forward.
Okay, on the substantive, Councillor Zabellin.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, just want to support what Councillor Naylor said, everything I just said, but also the intent of the alternative there is to reduce the scope somewhat and spread more evenly across the 10-year period. So I will be voting against this and hoping we can address the amendment. Thank you. Or alternative, rather. Thank you.
All right. Nobody else is speaking. Okay. All right, councillors. There was a couple of comments made that the sacred cow was being put up. It's already been massively put up. The master plan had 120 million in it, and then it was put up in different mini, mid, and maxi, and the mini was cut down to 36. And now we've cut it to 17. How many more cuts do you want? I come back to Councillor Michelard's comments about you just can't cut things just for the sake of cutting things. And I know some of you want to do that, and that's fine. You're democratically allowed to do that. But there is massive risk here. And I just want to, there has been a master plan. Admittedly, it's a draft. There has been some concept plans. That's how we do these things. It's been advocated for as long as, well, actually before I've been here. So that's 4 LTPs. How much longer do people absolutely have to wait? And this is taking a very slimline version of that. There's talk of, oh, we'll retain everything. Well, I'm sorry, guys. It's a competitive world. There's cities like Christchurch, Tauranga, Hamilton, Wanganui, who all would want this. And I know there's 2 that I've mentioned that are absolutely targeting this stuff. You just play into their hands if you vote this down. So you will kill the golden goose if you do this. On the comments of the and perhaps, to be honest, some haven't probably seen what had happened with Arena previously, but there was a steering group that captured users. There's been very little talk of that, and of course we would invite the user groups into that. It worked well, it kept control of costs, and there was numerous cost escalations that came in stage 1 of the Arena Master Plan completed in the last term, and it was project managed well externally, which brought officers from different disciplines together. But the big thing was the community, it kept costs absolutely delivered Arena on time and on budget, and during a really difficult period of COVID. But what it did do was bring the community and users with it. So this is minimal cost, people. If you do this, geez, it's like Winston Churchill, what the hell are we fighting for? Anyway, please vote. For the substantive G8. And it's passed 12 votes for and 4 against. In light of that last decision there, and I understand that Councillor Wood has withdrawn his CET upgrade of lighting. He's gone. Yeah, he has. So we're now through to CET property purchase. No, that will need to, it needs to come through because it's a separate program. So this is G9, that council defer program 1763 CET property purchase to year 5, and that's led by Councillor Naylor. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Given we've just added an extra $5 million into our budget than what we consulted on in the first 3 years, I do think we need to make a little bit of progress in this space. So this program, when I back to the program information that was provided by officers, indicated that this was not needed till 2032. It's 840,000, and my view is that we should be deferring things that aren't needed till that point. Some of you might say it's a strategic property purchase. We have already spent quite a bit of money ahead of time for other strategic property purchases, as you're aware. And I think it's important to note that having something in the budget when we're telling our Chief Executive to please deliver in a KPI, please deliver on all the capital new programs, I think it would be a better way to actually, if it's not necessarily needed, to take it out of the budget. And if some opportunity arises that officers believe is worthy of our consideration ahead of time, then they can bring that to the table. So I think this is prudent, practical, and financially appropriate to the current environment.
Can I just ask a question of officers, please, in terms of property? Will the people that own this particular piece of property, firstly, 2 parts, will they wait till year 5? And secondly, do you have a sale and purchase agreement?
We are actively negotiating with them now. We're getting very close on agreeing to terms, as per previous direction from the Chamber to do so. Ultimately, whenever we buy any real property, we have to bring a report to the Chamber anyway to get approval. If you move this budget to year 5, and then that opportunity arose and we agreed on terms, we would simply bring a report and council could make the decision to bring that money forward accordingly if you moved it. But no, it's not technically under sale and purchase agreement yet, but we are getting very close on terms.
Thank you. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm guessing this program is probably not quite specifically named CET Arena property purchase. I wonder if that makes that more clearer for future deliberations.
It is purchasing the last remaining property on Waldegrave Street, adjacent to Arena. at the moment.
Can I just ask a little bit further? Thank you for confirming that. Is that the location where we're looking at building the Arena 5 development we've just deliberated on in the previous recommendation?
No, Arena 5, as per the master plan, is going on the corner of Cuba and Pascal. The building that was going to be going in this space, not currently in the 10-year plan. It's for the gym, sports and multi-use facility.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to speak on it. I think it's a little bit like strategic. This is a strategic purchase. Let's get the point of that. So, for our future needs of Arena, we've identified lots of land that neighbour the significant site for future needs. And so, when we're having strategic purchases, I think it's important that we do the acquisition in a timely and to make sure we don't leave it at risk them going to the market and having someone else buying it. If we've got a willing seller, we could be the willing buyer, and we don't have to pay these extra margins on top, having to go through a Public Works Act. So I think that's one thing to recognise in this. And property typically goes up in price and not any time cheaper. And so I think now's the time to kind of really consider this, making sure there's a provision, and to push it out to year 5. Like I think that's really would be unfortunate. So I'm going to be voting against this for those reasons. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Wood.
Yeah, just to concur with Councillor Dennison, the principle I take to property purchase decisions is either we should decide we're not going to do it at all and take it out of the long-term plan entirely, or bring it as far forward as possible, which is where it's at in year 1. Because if the principle is that we do plan on buying it at some point in the foreseeable future, then it's never going to get cheaper than it is today. In fact, we hold ourselves to ransom by pushing it down the line, because we make it clear that there's time for property escalation and price escalation. We provide opportunity for the market to purchase it, and then hold it at a higher premium for us. So if our intention is, if the council's moving this would just like us not to purchase it at all and make do with what we've got, then I would suggest a recommendation to remove the program in its entirety. There's no point in just kicking it down to year 5, because all that does is increase our price. So with that principle in mind, I encourage councillors to vote against this.
Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I certainly won't be voting to support this. And there's an old saying, you only get one chance to buy your neighbour. And I can certainly see the way that this will go. It will end up costing us a heck of a lot more money. So I'd certainly urge everybody not to support this. Thank you.
Okay, right, a reply back to you, Councillor.
Thank you. The saying it's never going to be cheaper than it is today is only true if you don't consider the interest cost of the debt that you need to pay for that. And we recently had a purchase here, and officers gave an example of what it might have cost us if we'd bought it 8 or 10 or 12 years ago or something. And everyone was like, oh, we should have done that. And then when I worked out the interest that we would have paid on that over the last 10 or 12 years if we had bought it, it was exactly the same as what it would have been. It would have been actually more if we'd bought it back then, including the interest, than it would have been now. So I don't really agree with that. And just look, I think the powerfulness of the submissions probably is better than anything I can say. And I just want to just read this quick quote. Please consider the cost of living crisis. People are struggling to eat. The elderly are having to choose between heat and food, so many are freezing cold. Rates increases push the price of rent up. Please try to minimise the increases with needs only. I don't believe things like this at a time like this is necessary. I would have been happy with what Councillor Wood suggested to waive it entirely, but deferring it to year 5 at least keeps that option open to reconsider in the next 10-year plan. But if it's for a program that's not even in the next 10 years, then the officer's report of saying it's not needed till 2032 is perhaps needs to be adjusted. It's obviously not needed till after 2034. So really, I think we can perhaps defer this one for now.
All right, we'll vote, please. And that has failed. 5 votes for and 11 against. Right. All right, we move through to the next one. And it's around council deferring program 243, Transit Hub, from years 3 and 4 to years 4 and 5, reduced to $6 million, excluding inflation per year. Councillor Zabellan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We are proposing that this program is deferred to years 4 and 5 on the basis that the indicative business case still occurs in year 1 and the detailed business case still occurs in years 2 and 3 as planned. The benefit of this approach is that the necessary planning work for the Transit Hub redevelopment does occur and the budget remains set aside for construction, so that enables us to bid for co-funding. But as the work progresses, we'll have greater certainty about the scope and the cost of the project. That information will emerge and the budget could be revisited in the next long-term plan. I don't consider that completing the detailed business case in year 3 and then beginning construction in year 4 to be an unreasonable delay. I acknowledge that the current terminal is not the best, but it is working. It's cold and deeply, deeply unappealing to users, but it's not failing or at risk of failure. So it is important, but it's not urgent work. So straightforward, I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Can I just ask a question, please, of officers? Is this that far out of, I mean, I've been involved in the business case. Is this a significant move from the business case years, or is this just a slight move? Because I know it is a move.
The latter, a slight move.
Okay. And what is the figure that we've got in terms of the total 21 million? And that's co-funded by NZTA?
The current assumption is 51%.
51%, okay. Councillor Hapeta.
Can I ask a question? So if it's 21 million, have we got any anticipation of what it would cost from our point of view? Because with 6 million, would 12 million do it?
The current assumption, and granted it hasn't been designed yet, but the current assumption was a $20 million rebuild. This would be a $12 million rebuild, so the scope would just need to be considered.
So is it a yes?
We could build something for $12 million. I'm just not entirely certain of exactly what elements would have to be changed from the current scope, but yes, we could build something for $12 million.
Okay, thank you.
Just one other consideration, I think, is there's been some conversation about on-road versus off-road sites, and obviously an on-road site would be cheaper because we'd be using the road reserve.
Thank you. I don't need to comment.
And just another question of officers before I go to Councillor Johnson is leasing is an option too, isn't it? So it doesn't need, this is a capital, isn't it?
Yes, the current program is made the assumption that we will be building and owning it.
The builder and the owner.
That is the current assumption.
All right. Cool. I'll go to you, Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'm not going to support this one. Those who've been around the table for a while will know that the transit hub, or the bus station, has been in the plans for a long, long time, and we keep putting it off, and we keep changing the scope. And we had a specific submission from Horizons around the need to provide better facilities for people waiting for buses in the centre of town. And I just think that this is much more of a priority project than some of the others that have been put up for cuts. And I don't want to see it deferred. If we can do it for less than what's in the budget, I'm sure that that will be presented to us. But at this stage, I don't really want to hamstring it by pushing it out, cutting it back, and then we can't provide. I mean, this is a basic facility that you might have, might expect in a big city to have a decent bus station. And then the other thing to say is that it's right next to the redeveloped Safari Hotel at the moment, and part of our discussions with them, I understand, not that I was part of them, but as I understand, is that there would be redevelopment of the bus station. So I just think we're perhaps risking a little bit too much by pushing this out and trying to scale it back. So I've been happy to support cuts in other places, but I think this is a basic facility that we do need to be providing for people, especially when we've just got an improved bus service and people need somewhere, including toilet facilities, etc. So I would urge you not to support this one.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Building in part on that theme, I have probably some sympathy for the reduction of investment scope. I think that, we heard from some submitters who are even quite prominent proponents of public transport that they thought that perhaps the level of investment wasn't quite right and could be readjusted. So reasonably comfortable with that. What I'm quite uncomfortable with is the delay in things. And so what I might do is test the room to see if there is an appetite for an amendment that would remove the delay, but persist with the $6 million, see if there's a seconder around that. There is a seconder, Councillor Fitzgerald. So while those words are getting there, really, yes, it looks like just a year. The reality is it's one long-term plan or the next. And frankly, every year and every term that I've been here so far, this has bounced one or two down the track. It has never happened, which is why today we have basically a black hole in the middle of the heart of our city when we're trying to actually run transport services now into the evening. I would invite anyone else to join me in taking the bus home after you have a chance to catch up with colleagues later in the evening. Very unsafe for somebody that, 50-year-old male, quite happy to roll around. The actual people that need to use this space, young people, women, people that have less choices and less ability to find other modes of transport, we need to make sure that we have something that's at least reasonably fit for purpose there. The $6 million, I think, per year can get us there, but we can't just kick this down the road. I mean, honestly, we have been hearing all day now the sounds of rattling cans getting kicked and kicked and kicked. This is one not to kick. So please do support this amendment so that we can get on with it at a reasonable price within the time frame that we have in front of us and actually get something that's fit for purpose into the community that matches the quality of the service and the timing of the service that's now available. There have been significant cases of harassment, of violence, etc., in the existing facility that is desperately out of touch with what we actually need for this city. So we do need to move on this. Please do support the amendment. Quite happy to wear the reduction in investment. Thank you.
Councillor Barrett, I'll support you on this amendment. I think there needs to be a bit of joined up here. The years are quite important. And we've got partners in this, Horizons. We're probably setting the bus service up for fail by not having some sort of transit hub bus terminus. Also Nzta, I think, if we're looking for some co-funding and then we're kicking the can down the road, as you eloquently put, it's not good faith with your partners, especially as we've entered into a business case with them. Look, I have some sympathy around the costs and I would support that. I actually think there's arguably a leasing opportunity as well. But we'll see that from the officers will come back with all of that. And the business case will test all that as well. Councillor Johnson said this is a basic service. Absolutely it is. Cities get judged by this stuff. And we were better served when the Newmans had those that are as old as me, the Newmans bus terminus in Princess Street. I mean, it was great. Had a cafe. It was nice and warm. You could buy tickets. There was people there. That's really, it's going back to the future. That's what we need. Had toilets. Geez, it was getting flash. So, in all seriousness, this is a basic service. We've got partners in this. There is an expectation that we should be doing this. I think this would have to be in front of people for probably about 10 LTPs. So I remember former councillor Bruce Wilson sort of talking about all of this. So, and that's a long time ago. So it's been around a little while. I appreciate what the substantive mover and seconder are trying to do around the cost, but I do think that we shouldn't be playing around with the years because it's all joined up with our partners. So I'll support the amendment and hopefully that will become the substantive. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can I have a couple of questions first before reserving my right to speak? Just in regards to the current structure there at the bus terminal, I remember being involved with the opening of that in the early 2000s. So can you give me an idea of the end of life or the life left in that asset that's currently in place that we invested in back then? Like foreseeably, could it last another 10 years even? Like, it's not at its end of life, is it? Or is it?
Purely from an asset management point of view, no, the existing structure is not at its end of life.
Okay. And do we have any information on the passenger numbers in the recent months since the new service?
Through you, Mr Mayor, the last conversation I had with James McGill, our Senior Transport Planner, was that there was a 50% increase compared to last year in terms of the trips, and the it must have been to the end of April compared to the previous year. But we can get those specific data. But certainly the conversation with James is I've seen the regional council have seen a good uptake in numbers.
Okay, I will speak. I was comfortable with the reduced budget, and I was actually very comfortable with the deferral. We've deferred the Streets for People program to year 4 and 5, and that was supported well. And I see this as part of the Streets for People concept, actually. The current structure, why maybe not quite as fit for purpose, certainly has life as far as a shelter goes. A lot of celebration about the regional council's bus service launch with its new buses, but the feedback that I get is like, how many people are riding on those buses? Because what they reflect back to me is they see more buses empty driving past than even with a few people on. At least when I've seen buses go past me, I've seen maybe 2 or 3 people on, and it doesn't seem why 50% increase. It must have come from a very low base, because my observations are that even if it's lifted 50% increase, it's still not many. And so my concern is we build another structure for this new network of buses, and yet the buses are found out that they need to start cutting buses off or rechanging the routes again. I'll take the point that, this has been in the program and deferred, but actual fact, the regional council's been undecided and oscillating around what to do and all the stuff. It's, I don't think that hold-up's necessarily been on our court. I think it's been with the regional council, in fairness. And so I think there is a real need to pause and monitor. I'd like to know the actual uptake, the actual numbers of how many people are getting picked up on each route. I think that's evidence that we need to make decisions of these sorts of types of investments. And so, therefore, I'm going to oppose this amendment to keep it in its current years. Personally, I'd even be open to having it deferred beyond year 4 and 5, but very pleased that we're reducing the budget. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Anybody else against this? Councillor Naylor.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. Yeah, I'll also oppose the amendment. There's a whole lot of work that needs to happen, especially if we're going to rescope before we're ready to do this work. We don't even know where this is going to be yet. Part of the reason to look to move this out is actually the debt, the size of our capital new in years 2 and 3 are just huge. I agree with Councillor Dennis, and it may be that we can defer it out more, but deferring it out to years 4 and 5 at least gives us the ability to consider in the next long-term plan where best that sits. But we do have a good functioning waterproof cover at the moment for those coming into the central CBD, so I'd prefer deferring it. But very pleased to hear Councillor Barrett's willingness to reduce the budget.
Anybody else against? Councillor Zabellan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I just quickly wanted to challenge the idea that this previous motion is kicking anything down the road, because the business cases will be proceeding as planned in years 1 to 3. As it currently sits in the budget, the construction is set to begin in year 3 upon completion of the business case. So there is no suggestion that this work won't continue. We're just talking of 6 months to a year to give us greater certainty about what our options are for what we will in fact be constructing. And I do believe that the LTP process is more appropriate for nailing down what that budget and what that program will be. I think that's a sensible place for it to sit. I do have sympathy for people who've been around several long-term plan processes and seen this kicked down the can, but I would challenge the idea that that's what the previous motion is trying to do. It's just trying to shore things up before we commit to the program. Thanks.
All right. Councillor Barrett, right a reply? No. Okay, we're going to vote on the amendment. And that is passed, 11 for and 5 against. All right, we now, excuse me, we will now make this the substantive. Okay, so we've now got the substantive G10 that council reduced program 243 transit hub to 6 million, excluding inflation per year. So the years has been amended as per the successful amendment. So we're now just dealing with the cost issue of that. So we've had you speak to it, Councillor Zabellan. Councillor Naylor.
Oh, I was actually just going to say it might be good to specify the years now that we've taken the rest of that out. 6 million per year for years 3 and 4. Do we need to specify that?
No, because it got lost. The years, it's back to where it was.
Yeah, where it is currently in the draft is years 3 and 4.
Yep.
So you.
So it stays there.
That's fine. I think I've spoken to. I'm happy to support this. Obviously, as a seconder.
Okay, councillors, there's nobody else in the queue. Okay, we're not going to do that. Thank you. It's good for timing. So we've got G10 there, and we're just going to vote on the substantive there around the transit hub and the money. And this passed 15 votes for and 1 against. Right, okay, we move now to G11. And this is around Council Reduce Program 1845 Te Marae Hine to $0 for years 1 and 2. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. This is a program that we have invested in recently. Those of you will have noticed the new pavers and paths that have gone out there recently. Te Marae Hine also has renewal budget program 1831. So once again, this comes from the message from the community is look after what we've got already, but limit the new stuff. So whilst retaining the renewal budgets for Te Marae Hine, this suggests that we can pause on doing new stuff there just for a couple of years.
Sorry, just a question to the mover, given her introductory comments. Is this a pause of budget or a remove of budget? Because you're not suggesting a deferral, from my understanding. You're just suggesting that the budget would be removed in years 1 and 2.
A deferral, so that the budgets in year 1, 2 and 3 would be 3, 4 and 5. Sorry, I probably should have indicated, been a bit more specific.
I think it... my suggestion would be that you make that clearer in the...
Perhaps defer to year 3. Does it make it clear enough? That's the intent.
Okay, I'll just, look, I'm the seconder on this, and that's what I thought I signed up to as well. So thank you for clarifying that. Look, councillors, we saw what, and not that we should be micromanaging things, but we went into hearings a couple of weeks ago, and we're ripping up perfectly good pathways in the square Te Marae Hine and replacing them while we're asking people for rate increases. To me, that is not right. And this goes some way to perhaps controlling the urge of officers and programs if we're not prescriptive about it. I don't think the optics are great, and that was my real reasoning behind this. And to me, that is an increased level of service. That's a nice to have, and we're hearing loud and clear that we've got to be pragmatic. So I urge you to support it. We've got a fantastic space in the middle of our city. It's actually looking after that rather than adding new things to it. Councillor, do you need a right of reply? Oh, Councillor Barrett, sorry. Okay. All right, do you need a right of reply? No. We're going to vote on G11, please. And that has passed 16 votes for and none against. Moving through to G12, and this is around the Council Reduce Program 1846, City Reserves, Walking Extensions is 0 for years 1 and 2. Councillor Naylor. Councillor Naylor, could I just suggest, is this the same as preferred?
No. So this one is a little bit different to the previous item in that there is budget allocation right across the 10-year period for this. This is also one that has significant renewals at about 120,000, 123,000, 125,000 over the next 3 years. So we have invested significantly in city reserves over recent years. Once again, we should look after what we have. When I looked up the program, the information the officers had included under the program, it said that this was if needed. So once again, when we confirm a capital new program in any given year, we're telling our chief executive, please deliver on this. If it's a program that's only if needed, My view is if we do reduce that budget for years 1 and 2, if there is anything that's urgent that actually needs investment in years 1 and 2, I'd expect that officers would bring that to us. But given our current feedback from our community, I felt it was something that perhaps we could reduce for the first 2 years, particularly given the increase in rates over that time.
Councillor Johnson.
Just if we could have a comment from officers about the implications of, because this is cutting 2 years worth of money, what it will affect and what the implications are.
Kathy.
Kai whakahaere Ngā Pāka, Manager Parks, Kathy Deaver-Todd. So this first couple of years is actually targeted at some particular projects that are part of ongoing subdivision work that's occurring, land purchase, and in particular developments would be the recent bridge that we've put in on the Turatea stream, connecting that up to Chablais Way at the end of Valley Views. And the Corsica Sardinia Way loop for the existing subdivision, for the existing residents in those areas. So just to be clear, years 1 and 2 was already targeted within some existing developments.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Just further on that, Kathy, so we'd just be delaying the purchase if this was successful? There's no other purchaser sitting there to buy it?
Councillors, over the last couple of years, we haven't had a provision for land purchases and we've been bringing those back to council. However, in these particular cases, there are land negotiations underway for those subdivisions. We include within a subdivision plan a walkway link, and then we are obliged to buy that piece of land. In the past, we have had a little bit of trouble with timing with some of those, but we've got a number underway at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm not going to support this proposed cut to the budget. Not only, as the officer said, these pieces of work that are underway and committed strategically, if not actually financially. We know from general feedback from our community when we talk about how they like to be active in our community, that walking is a really accessible exercise for our community, and our walking tracks are valued, loved, and our commitment to continuing to develop that as our city grows has been one of the things that has helped us to deliver on that commitment to keeping our community active. So I would really hate to see these opportunities get lost at this stage, because once subdivisions have gone in, often that is much more difficult to achieve those opportunities. So I'd ask us to hold off on this one, please.
Look, councillors, I live out this way. It's paddocks. It's still going to be paddocks for the next 2 years. Nobody else is buying it. We're hearing from our community that we need to defer or pull back. Negotiations can still continue. Or we're not actually stopping it. We're just deferring it in the sense that the negotiations can start to be perhaps realised in year 3. I don't want it to make it the bridge to nowhere, where it hasn't got connections. But in all seriousness, if there was something that could perhaps wait, I believe this is probably one of them. So I'll be supporting this motion. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just with a bit of a consistency around the acquisition line, if it's strategic and it actually has some merit in acquiring, I think it's worthy of progressing. And if the developments are occurring and the conversations are happening, I think the amounts are fairly modest. I think I'm going to oppose this recommendation for deferral. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
All right. Do you need a right to reply? No. We will vote, please. That's failed for a lack of majority, 8 all. All right, we'll go through to our next one, which is around council reducing program 1853, local reserve development, to $0 for years 1 and 2. And again, Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. I love the reserves in our city, and I think we've made some really good investments there in recent times. There is also $798,000 a year that we invest in renewals of those local reserves. So my view is this is about pausing on doing new stuff in those reserves for a couple of years, and I think that's what our community is asking us to do. Adds up to around $200,000.
Councillor Johnson.
Again, just a question to officers about whether this fund has already been targeted and what reserve might be affected. Thank you.
Kathy Deaver-Todd, Manager Parks. So this particular program is not for new reserves. This is develop existing reserves that council has owned for some time, and now the developments around them are getting to a point that we need to develop those reserves. So our plans were for Adderstone Reserve, and councillors will remember when we had the discussions about the sale of Adderstone Reserve, the community came back and asked us to get on and develop that reserve. So that was year one, and planning for the connection from the property we have at 46 Rodeo Drive down to Freedom Drive, with the intention of developing the link down to Freedom Drive in the second year to enable the residents of Freedom Drive to access the playground and the residents of Rodeo to get down to the Freedom Drive Lagoon, which is about to hand over to council.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not prepared to support this. It's principally around the local in this. So, you know, we tend to think about all those destination type places that have seen significant investment. But actually, when you go around and you go locally in our communities, when you see the neighborhood level reserves, they are tired. Quite often they have almost no facility in them. And this is a very small way that we actually respond to that incrementally over time. And I don't think this can needs kicking down the road. I think it's a very small sum, and we should just continue with steady progress that we are doing to make these reserves better for the local communities around them. We hear often about the need to provide shade, the need to provide low cost and in this case, no cost recreational opportunities in our city. This is a very simple yes for me to maintaining it and a no on this amendment. So ask you to join me in that.
Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I stand to support this, obviously. You know, we've got over 100 parks in this city, and it's not too much of a hop, skip and a jump to the next one. I've got no problems with kicking cans down the road, and this is one that I certainly don't mind kicking for a few $100,000 saved. You know, it's got low importance. It's basically for paths, and, you know, come on. Doesn't matter waiting a little while, does it? That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Councillor Barn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, not supporting this one either. I think our development of our place strategy has been a really important piece of work that we've done over the last few years at council, and the good work that happens in on that space. One of the predicating factors is good local access to places to play, especially as we recognise the changing shape of our city with increasing urban density, recognise the cost of living crisis that we're in that impacts on people's ability to access opportunities that they need to pay for or pay for travel to get to. The continuing development of local reserves is a key part of the character of our city, one we should be rightly proud of, and I'm not prepared to sacrifice even a small part of that at this stage.
Councillors, I'm a little bit on the fence, but I think I will support this. Yes, I think Councillor Arnott summed it up. There's 100 different reserves and parks, and I appreciate that people need to get to them, but actually they're relatively easy to get to. So I think for years 1 and 2, and we kick back into it year 3, it's the same sort of prioritisation debate. And yes, I agree, it is kicking the can down the road, but sometimes you've got to do that. So I will support this one. Councillor Naylor, right of reply.
Thank you. Just briefly, another quote from one of our submissions. We are all feeling the financial pinch, and I beg you to use our funds for priority work only. Yes, of course, local reserves are priority, but these are reserves that this is just about waiting for 2 years. I think our community will appreciate us more for showing some restraint in terms of debt-funded projects, particularly, especially when we've got so many amazing parks and reserves across the city that people can travel to.
Okay, we will vote, please. And that's failed for 8 all, for a lack of majority. Okay, probably a reasonable time to have a little bit of a break. So look, we'll be back in the chamber at 1:45. And could I just ask the staff if they could put something up? Where are we at? Is that easy to do, or we'll just put that up?
Just quickly before we all disappear for some food. So the 2 graphs that we showed earlier this morning are now updated as of the live position right now. Appreciate that's probably a touch hard to see, but I'll read the rates increases as we go across the years. 11.2, 9.3, 9.2, 8.7, 7.5, 5.4, 6.1, 6, 3.3 and 4.1. Those are inclusive of the additional debt repayments, and we have included the exclusive as well, but I won't read those out. Same with the debt limit on the right-hand side, the debt limit with and without the additional debt repayments. And as requested, the capital tab, if Sarah, if you can flick over to the capital tab, the current capital program totals over the 10 years are there, as well as the total debt figure across the 10 years as well. I won't read all those figures out. So that table is in section 5.8 of the agenda as of the start of yesterday. That's the live picture now.
All right, thank you, helpful. All right, we'll see you back in the chamber. Thank you.